Clerk will call the roll.
Glenn Whitley, County Judge.
Here.
Roy Charles Brooks, Commissioner Precinct 1.
Present.
Andy H. Wynn, Commissioner Precinct 2.
Here.
Gary Fickus, Commissioner Precinct 3.
Here.
J.D. Johnson, Commissioner Precinct 4.
Here.
Constitutes a quorum.
Thank you. It's that time of year.
Stick a pin in that just a minute, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Go right ahead.
Good morning, court members.
Good morning.
As the judge said, it's that time of year again, and so today what we're going to do is present to you, initially we're going to give you some economic data for you to look at. Then the auditor's office is going to come up and talk about revenues, and then the budget department will come up and talk about the budget, and then we'll go through the various departments. So if we'll start by going into this. And one of the interesting things about, as you look at this chart, you can tell that we're slowly but surely coming out of the economic downturn that most of the country has experienced. Tarrant County has been very fortunate in that we have one of the most robust areas in the country as it relates to the economy, and I think we see that now when you look at the appraised value. We moved from $126.8 billion in appraised value for tax year 13 to the tax year that we're talking about today, which is tax year 14, to $135.6 billion, which was a very good growth.
And most significantly, we're now above the high water mark of 2009.
That's correct. It's interesting to look at that, Commissioner, in that it took us from 2009 to 2013 just to get back to par on that area.
Yes.
So when you look at some of the things that are increasing, you see that we found that we have increased mineral lease properties. We had high years in 9, 10, 11, and they began to decline, and 13 was not a good year, but the good thing about it is that we're now looking at a growth in mineral values again. As far as this year, we're seeing about a $300 million increase in mineral values. We're sitting at about $2.6 billion now in appraised value as it relates to minerals. Of course, our tax rate, the tax rate that staff is proposing, is the same one that we have had for some time now. Interestingly, when you look at 2004 and 2005, we have either held our own or have decreased the tax rate through all of those years. There's never been an increase in those particular years starting in 2005. The tax rate that we're looking at now is 0.264 per $100 valuation. And as we go through the budget today, we'll talk about what part of that is general revenue aspects and what part of that is debt service. When you look at our rates compared to other the big counties, we have consistently been the second lowest rate. And this rate here actually is a rate that does not include the hospital districts. And if you include the hospital districts into ours and Dallas's, Tarrant County's rate is actually smaller than Dallas County. The new construction aspect, it looks a lot like the entire economy in that that we have a continued increase in new construction. Last year we saw about a $1.7 billion increase in construction. For this coming tax year, 2014, we see about a $2.2 billion increase in construction. The average single-family home value, I think what's interesting to note, currently for tax year 14, we're looking at an average home value of about $143,000, $143,223. And that continues to increase. We had a low back in 2010 of about 131,000, almost 132,000. But as you can tell, we're continuing to grow out of that, and home values continue to increase. So So these are the tax rates that we're looking at as it relates to that average taxable value. And we see that it's $143,000 for a single-family residential dwelling. I think something interesting to note that if you look at 2008 and compare it to 2014 on the tax on an average home in Tarrant County, that tax amount has only increased $21 a year. And so today, we followed the same process and procedures that we've done in the past. We're going to ask you to do a preliminary vote on each budget and to tell us yes to include it in the final budget or no. If you vote no, that means, if the court votes no, that means that no further considerations will be given to that particular item. And then the to be continued, TBC, which are to be considered. There may be some elements that you want additional data on, or if you want to just simply take a little time to decide, then we'll just designate that as a TBC, and the budget department and the budget officer will be bringing that back to you for your consideration. And now I'm going to turn over to Ms. Tidwell.
You're not going to sing the national anthem for us today, are you?
I can assure you I'm not.
No, I'm talking to
Mr. Manius?
You know, there's a story to that.
There is a
I
story.
thought there might be. You want to tell it? Or keep us in suspense?
Well, you know, Councilman Singleton, he really, you know, he can't go with the flow. He tends to want to be so exact. And so when we get to that part of the national anthem where the rocket's red glare versus rockets bursting in air, which is really pretty close, the same, it's a precursor to them exploding. He took it upon himself to correct me about that in a public setting the other day. And of course, Commissioner Johnson will not let it go.
Yeah. Kaboom.
It was a big boom anyway.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. And no, I'm not going to sing. Oh, must be the other way. There we go. I don't have any detailed comments this morning. I'd be happy to answer questions. Our revenue process is pretty much the same as it's been since I arrived over, I guess, almost 18, this is supposed to be 19 years ago now. We work with the departments. We work with them based on any new fees, changes, and what they know about their business. We also look at what the actual for last year was. We take where we are this year. That's the budget column. And then, of course, the projected is where we think we're actually going to wind up for 2014 and how that's different from the budget. And then we come up with our estimated 2015. There's few instances where the departments in our office might differ. We tend, again, to take a conservative approach, but we try to be as honest and realistic as we can with the numbers. From year to year, obviously, things vary from that standpoint. I will say that the revenues and the budget overall, we have the adequate reserves. We have the reserves number that we've talked about, the 10%, and those things are built into the budget. We can walk through whatever you'd like. I can try to answer any questions that you have. But I really didn't plan on going into it because in the scheme of things, there's a lot of things that change from year to year, but a lot of them are not very significant because of the size of the budget.
Obviously, I usually do, so.
You have some questions? Yes, sir?
It won't be surprising.
No.
So our tax revenue overall, we're saying is up about 16 million. I think I know the payment in lieu of taxes, we're just budgeting that conservatively. I'm now looking at the book. I don't know if
Right.
that's where you're at.
There's also
We're
some
picking up an extra million this year, but
Right.
we're not going to anticipate.
No, we can't.
Here.
We don't have any way of assuring that we'll get that money for that next year.
Sales tax commission, that's just vehicles. We're selling more vehicles, therefore we're getting 3 point. 3 million more in estimate?
Right, that's just the transportation code for the vehicles, right?
Now, also, some of this is coming from the road and bridge.
Right, and there is
1.4.
still that last change where the percent was changing, where it was all going in general fund, where in the past some of it had gone in road and bridge.
Road and bridge.
But that's small relatively as well.
Constable fees, now, is that something that, I mean, it looks like 3 and 4, and I guess 1 are up. Pretty significantly, you know, it's almost 10% in some situations, it's more than 10% in 3. What's caused, is 3 the deal with the,
We have a new constable in 3 for 1 from prior years.
okay, that may be all that needs to be said from that standpoint. And I think it speaks to the fact that someone staying on top of that and looking at it may or may not be able to help us out. You're sitting down, so don't faint, Waller, but you're doing a good job on the passport, both the photo fees as well as the passport fees. That's up almost 300, over 310,000 is what we're showing as the budgeted amount, which is, I'm sure, going to be conservative, and it'll probably be more than that. So thank you for that.
We have that as one of the major revenue change elements on the page 13. Some of the items that you're asking about, the tax collection commission, the sales tax,
Yep.
the constable service fees, and then the district clerk, those are all noted there on that page, all the things you've asked about.
In the domestic relations area, I noticed several decreases. The performance bonus, the filing fees.
They think that some of their services are actually going to go to third parties, that some of their stuff's going to go away. So, again, we're working with them based on what they think's happening to their environment.
So when they say they think it's going to third parties, so it's being outsourced?
Yes.
By the state.
Mhm. Yes.
And then I'm looking at the justice of the peace fees, and I'm comparing those to 2012 when they assured us that they were going to be increasing their revenue. And almost without exception, they're down both in the fees area and in the fines area. So I will be interested as we come to their section, if any of them are here, to hear what their thought process is behind why what they thought was going to be a fairly significant increase became a fairly significant decrease as we went through the year. Medical examiner, toxicology, lab analysis, that went down by $93,000. Do we have any idea what's going on in that area?
That's too detailed for me this morning, sorry. I can get you an answer on that, but I don't know.
Criminal court fees, especially I guess this would be our county criminal courts.
Right.
Really want to point out that criminal court number 1s went up by about $155,000, and I understand that there may be some extenuating circumstances, but then I see criminal court number 10 who crossed the $1 million mark this year. The next closest one to him is $472,000, and that's criminal court number 4.
But 10 is the that's the criminal court, but that's the traffic, right, that's the traffic. Judge Sorrell's with the traffic cases, so he has cases that are not heard in all the other courts.
It'd be interesting to see if you took that out where he compares with
There's a way to do that, but you're right, it would be interesting.
because his increased by $237,000 over I guess 2012. I started kind of looking at a comparison to that. Indigent defense, I know what happened there. We had a special distribution in 2014 that we're not going to get in 2015. Child support monitoring, is that again the state outsourcing that?
Yes.
Does the state I guess the state feels like they're gonna, I would like for us to, I mean, I guess work with child support or whomever we have to work with, because that's about $500,000 or $600,000 now that they're moving out, and maybe they're gonna get it a lot more efficient outside of that. I'd be interested to see if they are, especially as they give us unfunded mandates and don't bother to pass along money to us. Why are we estimating that the parking, Fort Worth TIF 3 parking lease, I guess that's going up, but we're projecting 50,000, and I know this is really getting into the detail. We're projecting 50,000 for this year, but we're only estimating 25,000 for next year.
That's because we had a certain number of years on that lease, and that lease is, the high dollar lease has gone away, and now we're at a point where that we'll make that available, but they're going to pay the maintenance. We also, in that TIF, we expect them to do that with the other parking contracts if, as they expire. However, we have a most favored nation clause, basically that says if you keep those fees up, well, then you need to come back and pay us also.
Interest income received, we're forecasting 350. Our budget was 150, and you're going ahead and adding 200,000 to it next year.
We're continuing to work on the ladder to earn a higher rate.
Is some of that because we've gone to that new program with?
That's what I'm saying. Yes, the
The
ladder.
National
We're trying
Association
to buy. We're trying to not have it all just reside
Super.
in the fund tax pool.
Forfeiture fees, again, Mr. Wilder, thank you. County clerk, Ms. Garcia, thank you. Jury reimbursement down by 42,000. Any?
Well, there's a correlation there. You know, we're going to more online jury calls, so we're actually calling fewer jurors. And we're able to now cancel those jurors from coming in if the trial falls through. So there's a correlation between jury costs and jury reimbursement.
And if you don't show up, if you can cancel it, if you don't show up, then we don't have to pay you even the $6. Whereas in the past, when they came down here and found out that we didn't need them, because they came, we still had to pay them $6.
So I'm assuming that since this is under the revenue side of this deal, that was $6 that they were contributing back to us?
No, it was the state. It's the reimbursement from the state. In other words, if we're not paying the jury,
Okay.
the state's not
Okay.
going to pay us back.
I hear you.
We pay 40, they reimburse it 34.
And then there's that parking revenue, again, 46,000 down. Is that the same thing, Mr. Manius? Is that the,
That's
that's us?
That's our parking.
So our employees aren't paying as much in parking? They've decided to walk wellness program, right?
There you go. Or it was overestimated.
There are some fees that we charge to the general public for parking in our various garages
Right.
Other
during
revenues,
business hours.
other revenues and contingent revenues, can you talk to me a little bit about what all that might include? It's up
And would you be,
it was budgeted at 100,000, we're coming in at 300, we're projected to come in at
oh,
365.
the other revenue? I don't know, but what is that, Brett? Oh, it's the Staples, which is up here, yeah. It's up here on the screen.
Okay.
The 212. This is the first year that we've gotten the 3% rebate from Staples. That's what that is.
Contingent, okay, that, I'm not gonna worry too much about. The parking that you talked, or the sales tax commission, if you get down in the road and bridge, that's where that was the last year where,
Yes, it's now going all in the general fund.
and then under the motor vehicles road and bridge fee, that's up 620, and I'm assuming that that's just vehicle registrations, additional vehicle registrations. That's the $10 fee.
Correct.
Some counties, by way of the legislature, were allowed to raise that an additional $10 for road and infrastructure projects. So a doubling of that, if we were given that option, that could be an extra $16 million for transportation projects.
That would require a legislative change, but we've
Correct.
already talked with
That's what I'm saying,
Mr.
there's about
Mendez.
5 or 6 that have been given that approval thus far. That's my questions. Thank you.
And then the last item is just the changes in cash carry forward. And again, we will fine tune those when we close July and have one more revision before you finalize the tax rate and adopt the budget in September. And that's just a schedule there again with the actual compared to our estimates.
So right now, you're estimating, we budgeted to have about 76, 77 million, and now you're looking at around 84, 85 million?
I didn't do the math, but I trust you're correct, yes. The 71, the 13 and a half, the 485 is what we're projecting. The actual was last year, and then when you move over to what our estimate is, right, it's the 69, the 9, 5, and the million.
You see what?
79 budget versus 77.
Yeah.
I mean, 77 budget.
You're looking at the 2 budget numbers versus the 2 actual numbers?
Correct.
Or versus the actual and the...
I am.
Okay. Because what that basically says is looking at the budget versus the estimate is we're going to collect more than we spend by approximately $2-3 million. And so if we end the year at 84, 85 versus what we had budgeted at 77, is that right? Yeah, close to 77. Then we're going to be in good shape from that standpoint, and it allows us a little bit of effort. You know, last year, and I know I think you've got built into these numbers. Last year we made the decision to send an extra $4 million to TCDRS in addition to doing the COLA. And the total of those two were approximately $6 million. And I think we have that $6 million in there again this year. As we get to that area, we can discuss that and look at that. But it just says that, one, we are continuing to spend less than what we bring in, and it's allowing us to keep up with the reserves as to where we had discussed those earlier as a court. And it may give us the flexibility to continue to look at doing more toward our unfunded liability, which I think is a result of some of the things that the TCDRS has told us earlier is going to result in some changes on our unfunded liability that we're going to need to discuss and to at least consider. Looks good.
Any other questions? Thank you.
There's one question you had that wasn't specifically addressed, and that had to do with contingent revenue. And we actually have a like amount in the budget for contingent expense, so we can recognize any changes in the revenues that might occur during the year. Saying that, there wasn't enough in those two numbers to address the change in cash carry forward in the general fund. So in the end, we'll probably adjust that number on both sides, so it's a wash, to $5 million. Right now, we have it at 1.5. It's a wash. But if we have a significant change in ending cash balances, which we won't know until December when everything's closed out, we'll have a way to address it and effectively utilize it if possible. The only thing we used it for this year, for instance, is when we opened the Mansfield passport office, and we had to fund some expenses and, of course, recognize some revenue from that. So, speaking of budgets, here we are. All this does is give you a quick breakdown by functional areas. And, of course, if you look at your budget documentation, the general administration is a much higher number than what you're seeing there, because right now it includes some significant pieces that will get spread out amongst all the departments. And the significant pieces are the capital number, which is in the neighborhood of $30 million, And of course, right now, all of the merit and structure adjustment resides in general administration. That, in the end, will get allocated to all departments. As you can see, right now, the merit and structure is at $6.1 million. There's additional almost $2 million that's built into salary budgets already for law enforcement, step increases. Now, that's still based on 2.5% merit pool, which was the recommendation of Hay Management. So if that's something that needs to be looked at and changed, we need to speak to that somewhere along the line. Interfund transfers, that's primarily two things. It is the transfer to Road and Bridge Fund from the general fund, and it's also the capital number that we end up transferring to a capital projects fund in the end, along with when we create the special purpose budget.
And I don't know when we want to discuss or when your thoughts are about discussing that 2.5, but on the raises as far as the merit.
Correct.
Mr. Manius, do you have a time when you specifically wanted to get to that, or do we stop at this point?
You know, I think that we can do it one of two ways. We can either talk about it today, maybe a little bit later on after we get into the budgets, or we can actually wait until tomorrow. We have this also agendized for Commissioners Court tomorrow.
Okay.
There is non-departmental budget is one of the listed departments that will come through during the day. And of course, there's an increase in reserves as our budget increases, and of course, our reserve has to increase to correlate to that. Significant variations, there's a large increase in capital. We have a lot of activity going on with some of our buildings, and of course, always with IT. There is an increase in debt service transfer, and as Ms. Tidwell said, that will be perfected as we go forward to our next phase of looking at cash balances. We do have some information that we know will change the cash carry forward in Road and Bridge Fund. The significance of that, we're not ready to say yet. We have a couple of authorized but not funded positions still. There are 21 new positions in the budget. Retiree lump sum payment, that's a reduction. In essence, what we spent in fiscal 14 was $6.1 million, and what we budgeted was an even $6 million. Again, that's something we can look at and perfect as we know what direction we're going to take on that.
What is that primarily for?
The professional services?
No, the lump sum, retiree lump sum payments.
Well, that's a little misnomer. It's all under that one category. Shouldn't say lump sum. It shouldn't say retiree. It was a combination of the retiree payment and the payment we made on our unfunded liability.
So it shouldn't say retiring, it shouldn't say lump sum, it should
Yes.
just say payment?
Yes. Starts out one thing and we add stuff to it and we don't go back and perfect the title, okay? Thanks.
One of those days.
It will be. We've negotiated, what's the electricity providers?
P3.
P3. P3 is negotiated some new contracts, so you see a significant reduction in utilities. We talked about increasing reserves. We've seen some downward shift in workers' comp. That's one of those things that it's always kind of hard to sink your teeth into. But there's no doubt that the workers' comp network has provided a significant benefit to the cost of our workers' comp claims. And, of course, also the return to work light duty program. Commissioner Brooks, your head's in the way. Never noticed that before. We're going to have fewer significant changes. Council fees are up. Some of that is a result of Senate Bill 1611 and the Michael Morton Act, as it's kind of slowed down the judicial process a little bit. And we actually had a conversation late last week about talk amongst the judges of changing the fee structure, possibly paying an additional amount to someone who might be board certified. If that conversation continues, then that number will also go up. I'm not really sure I have a way of estimating that accurately because I don't know the significance of those that are board certified that are on the jury wheel.
I was going to say, if it's on a jury wheel, then, I mean,
Not
that's...
the jury wheel, I'm sorry.
It is?
The council fee.
Yeah, right. the attorney
Council wheel.
Oh, no, wheel. Yeah, I agree. I don't understand necessarily that reasoning, but, okay.
Like I said, it was a conversation that actually happened on Friday, so I have not had a chance to follow up on that. There are additional operating costs that are in the budget that are related to new buildings. Of course, we'll be opening the Civil Courts building later next year and the expanded Northeast Sub-Courthouse.
Taj Mahal out there, is that cool?
Shh.
Yeah.
The civil courts complete December, move in March, probably. So it'd come up under full operational, probably March, April timeframe?
Move in.
Okay.
The next is new positions, just kind of a quick breakdown of where all of those stand. Of course, 11 are related to the new buildings. The new programs we've got denoted there, that actually is to open a passport office in the Northeast Sub-Courthouse, assuming the State Department approves it. To the best of my knowledge, that's still under consideration. Thank you. I'm sorry. Still under consideration,
He
so that's
moved on
not
you.
firm yet.
He needed to be close to the lawyers.
The other one we have noted under new programs, if you'll remember 2 years ago when we opened, well, not we, when One Safe Place opened, we put a employee at that facility. We first did it with a what's the word?
Grant?
Project. I can think of it as contract, a project employee. And there is significant activity at that location, so now we're recommending the elimination of the project employee and funding it as a full-time position in the DA's office. The others are denoted as workload. Do you want any indication of what those are? Because I think I'll have to grab another piece of paper. A lot of cords down there. For instance, those are a contract specialist in IT, an internal affairs investigator in the Sheriff's Department,
Don't you have a security deputy in a constable's office?
yeah, security in Constable Precinct 3 or bailiff. And of course, Precinct 3 is actually the only JP location that operates out of 2 buildings. And the one at South Lake not only will be bailiff, but also provide security for the balance of the county departments that are at that location the rest of the time. Criminalist for DNA in the medical examiner's office, a medical transcriptionist in the ME's office. Resource Connection has a grounds person, but they're giving up some part-time for that. JP8, an administrative clerk. They've seen a good increase in their forcibles that are filed in that precinct.
And they're what?
Forcibles, evictions.
So that work, should that result in revenue?
It's already included. Now, there are a few positions that are on the recommended list that will still have to be evaluated, and I'm going to try to get these right just so the departments will also be aware of that. But the IT contracts administrator, the groundskeeper at Resource Connection, and the 2 positions in public health, which one has to do with the marketplace and being able for us to bill for insurance purposes and looking for an insurance specialist. We've collected on Medicaid for years and years and years, but this is a whole new world for us in the private insurance business. And the other is to help support their health information network. These are our uses of cash carry forward. Again, we try to use cash carry forward only for our reserves, of course, and those other one-time, which could be one-time issues. And of course, if we thought for a minute that we could just eliminate capital overnight, then I think we would be in trouble. But you can also see that we're only allocating $1 million of what's in undesignated toward the use of cash. The balance of that comes from our operating revenues. Employee compensation, again, we've got it in there at 2.5%. And here you can see the pieces of it all between just the general fund and the road and bridge fund.
Debbie, with the 2.5, if we were to move that to say 3, would that affect mostly the merit numbers? Is that what it would affect? Because the structure,
It affects both of those.
why would it affect a structure or a step increase?
Well, it actually doesn't affect the structure as much as it does the lump sum for those people that are currently at max.
But would they be in the merit, or would they be in?
They're in both. They're in both. Because what a lump sum max employee gets is equal to the average merit pool. What
Okay.
2.5%, depending on how their structure changes, they'd only get 2.5%. If the merit pool is 3, then that ceiling increases for a lump sum payment, depending on how the
I see what
structure
you're-
changes.
So if a structure change, for example, went up 2%.
Right.
And we gave a 3% on the merit, then they would get a 1% lump sum, so it
Correct.
would have, so some of that's already in there. So if we were to move the 2.5 to a 3, the change would occur in the merits, the structures wouldn't change, and the step increases wouldn't change.
Correct.
So it
So it'd
wouldn't be
the
more than,
merit and lump sum.
so that extra 0.5% would not be more than 1/5 of those two numbers that you have up there right now.
Our calculation shows that by changing the merit pool to 3%, it increases 740,000, basically.
How much?
740.
740 between the general fund and road and bridge.
And Debbie, the structure changes, they're not part of the 2.5, are they?
No. They're totally what Hay recommended. And of course, the step increases now are all 3% throughout the range.
Judge, we had some brief discussion about when to pick this up. We've always, as a court, taken up employee compensation at the beginning of the process. I would like to request that we do that again this year.
I think that's fine.
Whenever you'd like to do that, it'd be great.
So when we start looking at the numbers, or we,
You can do it now if you want.
Well, I mean, if we're moving from a 2.5% to a 3%, we're talking about $740,000.
Correct.
I'd like to see us move from the 2.5% to the 3%.
we'll take that in the form of a motion.
That is a motion.
I'll second.
We have a motion, a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Tax rates. This is simply the allocation between our current maintenance and operation rate and debt service. See, there's a marginal change in debt service. If you'll remember, this time last year, we hadn't actually sold the debt for that transportation piece. So that happened after the budget was approved, so our tax rate was just a hair off because of that. It gives you our effective tax rate, and of course, we told you that that's right at 2.99%. Our current rate is about 2.99%, or we'll call it 3 over our effective tax rate. Overall adjustments to the budgets as they were presented, excluding capital, is right at $3.7 million. You can see there was a more significant change in the capital that was requested. Of course, the budget is balanced, surprise, surprise, until a few seconds ago. And again, dates. And we're done. Questions?
Go back again on the dates for just a second. if you would
On
mind.
which one, sir?
The dates right there.
Okay.
So our intent right now is to adopt, on the new reading, I know, I mean, having the public, I guess that's, what are the changes as far as our publications and our hearing requirements? and
Jay's
stuff
become
like
the
that?
pro with that, so I'm going to let him come answer that.
It has changed, I will tell you, it has changed for cities and counties, but not for special taxing districts such as hospital districts.
If you noticed in Sunday's Star Telegram, the hospital district published the long, detailed, fine print notice. They're
It's
still
not something that I read online.
well, they're still required to do that, as it was the ESD. But the counties and cities do not have to do that. They have a different publication and notice requirement now compared to all other taxing entities. So we're running two different notice and hearing publication processes this year. The publication that the county's now required to do one publication. It's one of two, depending on what your proposed tax rate is, and if you have to call public hearings. If we call public hearings like this is suggesting, it's very similar to the other one, but it'll have to be published before the first public hearing, which is August 26th. And I can show you what those look like. Also, now on tomorrow's agenda, you have two different items, one for the county, one for the hospital district. One of the hospital district, you still have to take a record vote on a proposed tax rate. On the county, you no longer have to do that, so your name and your vote will not be shown on the county's publication, but it will be on the hospital district's publication, and they're going to look totally different. They have to still jump through a lot of hoops, the hospital district. The counties and cities do not. It's a very streamlined, in my opinion, it's much more friendly to the public to understand than what cities and counties have to do now versus these long calculations and detailed information that is confusing.
So we're still required to have the two public hearings.
If your tax rate is above the effective or rollback, whichever is lower.
Which ours is?
Yes, it is.
Yes.
For the first time in 3 or 4 years.
Yes. It's so streamlined and simple, it's confusing. I've been stressing over this the last 2 weeks, but
So,
it's very...
Since adopting the same tax rate as last year is going to raise additional revenue and put our effective tax rate above
below our current. I'm sorry. Your current tax rate, if you adopt or propose your current tax rate for Tarrant County, it will be above the effective tax rate.
right.
Right.
So do we have to make that squirrely motion?
Into September?
We're
Yes.
raising taxes by keeping the
Yes.
same tax rate.
Yes. That did not change. And you'll
Okay.
have to do that for all three of them.
No, we don't talk.
We don't do that, Deb.
That will be prepared for September 9th.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you,
If y'all
Deb.
have any questions, because this is different, just call me or email me and I'll try to do my best.
Let me give you just a couple of more dates, too.
I
I know,
think
maybe
you
I
ought to
should be
done.
quiet and sit down. September 29th, the last Tuesday of the month of September, we'll actually approve the special purpose budgets, and that'll include the final capital. Goodbye.
And then again, probably around the first part of November, first to middle of November, we'll have wrapped up fiscal year 14, and we can look at what we did last year as far as looking at the monies that we might want to send to TCDRS if we wanted to send more toward our unfunded liability.
Yeah. I mean, we won't close out November until the 15th to the 20th of December.
I hope we wouldn't close out. Closing out November is not as critical as closing out August.
Well, that's true.
September.
That's true.
You know, the one thing that, as it relates to that, one thing that we need to be sensitive to, this unrecognized revenue at this time, anticipated, we were setting that at 5 million? Okay, so, and that would be part of the pool that we would use to help fund any additional monies that we might send down to Austin.
Anything, that 5 would be there for anything
Anything,
above and beyond the 6 that we've already set up.
correct.
That's correct.
And again, one of the things that we've talked about with TCDRS is that if we choose to send money down either for the COLA or for a lump sum payment, or for, basically just an extra payment, that we potentially want to look at spreading that over a 12-month and just increasing our payroll percentage in order to accomplish that, as opposed to just sending a check down there for one lump sum amount before December 31st.
And that would be our recommendation also. And the benefit of that is that it spreads it amongst all of our funding sources. We have a large number of grants. We have special purpose funds. And that way, the general fund is approximately 77 to 80% of the total employees. I can't say that correlates totally to salaries. It depends on the type of positions that are in those grant funds versus ours. But it would spread it out amongst all sources instead of just the general fund, which is what we did this year when we did that with the lump sum on the unfunded liability. And we've talked amongst ourselves, and as long as we don't see any issues with the granting agencies, as long as it's something we do systematically.
Any other questions? Thank you, Dave. For most of it.
other agencies, other labs, and so the revenue is decreasing because they're not being utilized at the same rate. And I don't know why, I just know that that's what they said.
Okay.
And you are putting on how many percent of that?
I guess you want to see my calendar, do you?
No.
Hold on.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and start with the Sheriff's Department, Sheriff Administration.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Just a few minor issues that I would like to discuss with the court. This budget year has been challenging as always, but I want to commend my staff, particularly Scott Grazer, who keeps a tight rein on our numbers and has once again brought us in substantially under budget for this fiscal year. It's going to again be a large turn back for our budget. But in the budget for next year, there are really three areas that I just want to discuss with you briefly. The first one, and of most importance, is in the position request that we had. As you know, I've stood before you the last several years and talked about how difficult it has become to manage our courts and security operation as demands continue to just increase tremendously in that area, and we've tried to find ways to alleviate that. Last year, you may remember Judge Whitley said just to try to do what we could with on an overtime basis, and we've certainly done that this year. If you look at our overtime spending in courts and security, it has gone up dramatically. I think by the end of the fiscal year, we will probably have spent more than $100,000 just in overtime for courts and security. So we've done what we can with the existing personnel that we have. This year, we took a little bit of a different approach rather than just coming in, as I have in the past years, asking for more courts and security deputies. We talked about what would help other than that might be more palatable as far as funding something. And one of the things that everyone agreed on was that one of our big time consumers and big challenges is keeping the prisoners coming from the jail facilities to the court facilities. And the judges are working very hard. As you know, we work closely with the judges trying to keep the jail population down. And they have continued to try to run large dockets on certain days, run prisoners through their courts on a quick basis. And what we find is sometimes we're bogged down as far as getting the prisoners to and from the courtrooms. And so what we decided this year to put in for, instead of asking for more courts and security deputies, was 4 grade 51 employees who would do nothing but transport prisoners to and from the courtrooms. And we are believing that will assist us as far as keeping the bailiffs in the courtrooms, keeping the security deputies doing what they're supposed to be doing, and that's they're providing security in the courts, and yet helping relieve some of the burden and the backlog that we see trying to get people to court.
And they wouldn't be licensed peace officers? They
would not, Commissioner. We went the direction these will be grade 51 people, just basically the jail certification is all we need to transport the people to and from. And as you know, within a year or so, we're going to hopefully be finished with the conversion of the old cafeteria and the kitchen. God, I couldn't think of the word. The old kitchen in the correction center, and that will be ultimately turned into a holdover area, which again will help speed up the process of going and coming to court.
When is that scheduled to be completed?
You know, we're not sure yet, Commissioner. It will be probably toward the end of this fiscal year when that actually is ready to be operating.
When you do that, would you still need the 4, or would you need more?
I think we're going to be able to get by. We would look at it, Commissioner. I mean, our belief is the 4 going back and forth to the courtrooms with the prisoners will then allow us to keep that area maintained with our current personnel. That's our hope. So all we're asking for is, even when it opens, at least at first, and I may come back to you next year and say, hey, we need another 2 or whatever. But right now, we'd just like to have the 4 before that facility opens, because now, as most of you know, a bailiff who needs to take a prisoner to court has to come down out of the courthouse, through the tunnel, and actually into the jail, up the elevator, into the pod where the prisoner is before that prisoner is available. And so it's a long trip for those bailiffs or the court officers to make. And so with the 4 people that we've requested, we believe that transferring them back and forth would be a very smart thing to do, and the return trip is equally as long for a bailiff or a court officer. So those 4 positions were denied in the budget. They were really the ones that we were looking for to help alleviate some of this tremendous pressure that we work under each and every day. And I would like to ask that you consider restoring those 4 positions. The other positions that were...
Let me ask Debbie a question there. Mm-hmm. Debbie, did you figure how much the 4 positions would cost in the budget? Grade 51s?
Right. By the way, we did talk to the criminal courts administrator to see if they were having any significant issues with the time and effort it was taking bailiffs to get prisoners. And basically, we were talking about felony courts. Most of the misdemeanor courts docket defendants are on probation, not probation, bond. And they noted none. The only thing that was asked, I said, do you allow the judges, bailiffs, to retrieve prisoners out of the jail?
If they would, they seldom will.
Well, I think some of them would, but I got the opinion that they were not allowed to. So that's good information.
You're getting around to telling me how much money.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was looking up a file, but I started talking. With capital and everything, and I'm just going to quantify this as up to, because there's a few elements in the operating expense of those that we probably wouldn't fund. $213,212.
213
For 11 months,
212.
so the annual impact would be a little bit more in fiscal 16.
Does that include benefits?
Yes, sir.
I want us to consider that if we want to hear the rest of the sheriff's request, but
Okay.
we've had some talk and visit on this, and I want us to reconsider the cuts on those.
Our other two issues are really, not as critical, I don't think. The one thing that, and this is not a request, this is just I want everyone, the five of you particularly, and everyone in the room to understand, when the new civil courts building opens, the court building was designed to operate with 2 doors. We bought X-ray and metal detecting equipment for both of the doors. And through the budget negotiations, the budget officer has only approved half of the staffing for that. We needed 8 people to staff both of the doors. She has approved 4 with the understanding that only 1 of the 2 doors to the new court building will be staffed. And, I'm not here to say that's going to be a catastrophe or anything like that. I just want everyone to fully understand that we're going to have a brand-new building with 2 entrances, and one of those doors will be permanently closed. And I don't know how busy that building's going to be, probably not real busy at the beginning, but I don't know how frustrating it's going to be for people to come up to a door and say, oh, this one's closed, and have to walk down to the next one. What I don't want to happen, and my fear from 14 years of experience is, I don't want us to get 3 or 6 months into it and the building get very crowded, and then a decision be made, okay, now we've got to open that door, and there won't be any staffing to do that. Yes, sir.
I want to ask Mr. Phillips in the back question about the door issue.
Sure.
David, if somebody comes up to that door, and I guess there's no reason why they wouldn't, and the door's locked, can they walk protected from the weather, rain, through the other side of the door?
Yes,
Okay, it's covered?
yes.
Where is the door that is proposed?
Both on the west side.
Both on the west side.
Yes.
But one of them, the one that we're talking about is the one that's on the Belknap side, which is there adjacent to TCC parking lot.
Yes, that's right, Judge. We purposely had 2 doors laid out. That particular building has a smaller footprint than compared to the family law. The elevators need to be centered. It'd have been a little odd to put the one set of entry doors in the middle, and just you would have very short span of open space. And I've mentioned this to Ms. Snyder, is we don't know, and Sheriff's right, we don't know exactly the population of what's going to happen until we open. But we wanted that north door was also put in there because we don't know in the future what's going to be on the north side of Belknap, because there's 3 surface lots now, and that won't be good utilization of space when we get more urbanized. So there could be parking over there, could be buildings, we don't know.
Right now, that parking is TCC student parking.
That's correct. There's no public parking other than the street on the north side of the building.
And that'll be the doors that are closed?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, yet.
And so, again, I think I would certainly say that if we open it with just the one door open, but we later determine that then we've got to fund those
We
positions.
fund the positions before we'd open it. And
So
if it
the-
takes a couple of more months, it takes a couple of more months. But yes, the positions would be in place before we'd actually open the door. And, we looked at, the heaviest traffic is going to be on Monday and Tuesday when they have jurors show up. And we have information from jury services, how many jurors actually are assigned to civil courts. And even that in itself can be somewhat staggered. Because again, if they're using online juries, then those people will report whatever time the judge prefers. It may be 10 a.m., it may be 8 a.m. If they're coming from the jury room, the earliest that they could get there is probably 9 a.m. So those things would probably even be staggered too. But unfortunately, until we get in the building, we really don't know the magnitude of it all. Even the employee entrance, we don't think will be heavily utilized because of the
path you have to take once you get into the employee entrance. It's actually about 60 steps fewer if you just come to the front door.
But there is an employee entrance on the south side.
There is an employee entrance on the south side, and we've recommended that it be staffed similar to the way we do the employee entrance at the Justice Center, just with one deputy.
And again, you know, I'm not arguing for it. I mean, I'm fine either way.
Okay.
I don't want you to think I'm standing up here saying we've got to open that door and we've got to have 4 more people, because I'm not. All I want is the understanding that when that moment comes and everybody gets into a panic because we got people wrapped around the building, I just don't want someone to turn to us and say, hey, go open that door, because it's not going to happen until we get, you know, the additional staffing. And you all know how long it takes for that process to take place. So we could be, you know, several months away from being able to do it at the moment that it's decided that it's needed. And again, if y'all are good with that, I'm good with it. I just wanted it, you know, to be out and open for everyone to hear and understand that, you know, we may be under some level of criticism for that door not being open, but until it's funded, we really don't have the people to do it.
Now, David, that closed door will be accessible to people trying to exit the building, will it not?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I guess my question then, David, is it going to be a fire exit only, or is it going to be a general exit?
You want to sit up here closer, or do you just need your steps for the day?
Is it going to be a fire exit only, or will it be a general exit that anyone is allowed to?
I'm thinking it's going to be a fire exit only. We could use some signage, postal signage, and if we come to where we have to have an evacuation, we would
Right.
need that.
No, understood.
It would not be an hour-to-hour type.
As I'm saying, if people can just walk out the door, then obviously we got to have someone there watching it to make sure
Right.
no one wanders in the door. So it will have to be only utilized for emergencies, and probably needs to be alarmed if it is
And then you
open.
just have one person over on the employee entrance?
Correct.
Is that correct?
That's how we run that. Because we don't allow anyone to come through there but employees with their ID. And the last thing is just general, and it's something that I don't know that you know, how much attention y'all pay to this, but you know, we have worked for years and years to work as responsibly, fiscally responsibly as we can, and we try to squeeze numbers and do the best that we can. But you know, I talk to other police chiefs and I talk to other sheriffs and with their governing bodies, and there's always a concern and an interest of at what rate is public safety being funded? Is public safety being funded at a rate that is equal to other things? And, you know, there's always, when you talk to city councils and commissioners and things like that, everyone has a commitment to make sure that public safety is adequately funded. And we've done well, and I'm not here to complain, but the number is pretty interesting when you look at it. We started looking at from 2010 to current money. Since 2010, the revenue of the county has gone up 19%, and the budget from the sheriff's office has gone up 9%. So we're fully 10% behind the increases that we're seeing as far as if all things were equal. And again, I don't come to you and ask for a whole lot. I don't come up here and ask to pad things that aren't necessary. And as we look further down the road at future budgets, you know, I would like to see that we have a commiserate increase with revenue that's equal to the other departments. And the
Does that
other
take into account your maximum security jail?
Yes, yes.
What was your comparison year?
We were
2010.
comparing the overall income, you know, county revenue from 2010 to our growth since 2010. It's 19% to 9%.
Because those are some of the years that salaries were stacked.
Mhm.
So that plays into it some. And of course, what we see by and large, especially in the sheriff's department, because you're the largest operation as a whole, is that just employee turnover has had a significant impact just in salaries decreasing. So as we see those retirements continue to stay in the 100+ a year, that'll just continue to happen. True with a lot of your departments, but it's just more focused in there.
Well, Sheriff, I would commend you for your efficient operation.
Thank you. That's all I have, gentlemen, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Sheriff, I noticed you have several vacant positions since 2010 and 2013. I don't know if those vacant positions were funded in the last budget or not? Were they funded?
Yes.
Except for one.
Is it possible to move some money laterally from some of those vacant positions to fulfill some of your current needs?
We
Is
don't
it
do that,
possible to
Commissioner, because all our vacant positions are needed, and they stay vacant very, not a tremendous amount of time normally. And so when we move the money around, then we've got people working out of position, and it becomes kind of a bookkeeping nightmare. When I took office many years ago, the sheriff's office was completely filled with people working out of position, and people weren't where they're supposed to be. We spent years and years trying to get everybody back in the right payroll spot and the right number to make it manageable and to make it right. So
Most of them were working on overtime too, according to the budget.
Commissioner, we look at that fairly regularly, and I can't say that I've ever come across a situation in the Sheriff's Department where you see a single position that has gone long-term unfunded. It's just like we were talking about, they have a high turnover rate, there's no doubt about that, but then they'll go through a cycle of they'll be filled and then the next batch will turn over. There's one position that's in confinement that we do have on the list that's authorized but not funded. That's the medical liaison position. That's the only one that that is long-term unfilled.
And we are running now very, very close to, if you follow the numbers, I mean, I was told the other day we had 13 grade 51 jailer openings, and we had 12 in the pipeline to hire. I mean, we're staying current and staying even on our capacity, which we weren't always able to do, but we're staying very close now as far as both peace officers and jailers, and that's been a challenge because, as y'all know, the whole county is seeing a tremendous amount of retirement action.
I've been watching the report from, I guess it's generated from your office on a weekly basis, but from last year's budget, we had a discussion about security positions, and at that time, there were like 12 or 15 security positions open. I see you've narrowed that down, and now there's maybe one or two each week.
And we would fill those, Commissioner, but those one or two you're always looking at, we're always waiting on terminal benefits to run out. If someone leaves from courts and security, without fail, they have a tremendous amount of leave time. And I've tried to avoid, and I haven't been 100% successful, but I've tried to avoid coming over here every week asking for y'all to get rid of the terminal benefits for me. We try to ride those out. Some of them, those people have been there 20 or 30 years. It's a pretty substantial length of time before we can hire to fill that position. So, our recruiting and hiring guys have just done a tremendous job, both on the peace officer level and the jail staff level, and we are working as near capacity as we ever have since I've been here.
Sheriff, one more question I have, but only, let's go back to the 4 positions that you want for the transfer officers.
Yes, sir.
Which would run about $212,000. Will that not help us maybe on getting some of these prisoners out of jail sooner?
It should. I mean, that's the ultimate goal of everyone working. And again, let me say, as I always say when I'm up here, the judges, everyone in that organization works very, very hard to keep our jail population down. And, it's something that the faster we get those people through, the faster they meet attorneys, the faster pleas are agreed to, the faster they're out of jail. And it's not a surefire that you can put pencil to paper, but I guarantee you that everything that we do in that regard helps keep our jail population down. And this is an area that we've seen lag behind because we do have occasionally, or more than occasionally, people, attorneys and judges waiting on the prisoners to get to court while the bailiffs are making those long trips to pick them up, or they're waiting to do something else while the bailiff's making the long trip back to take someone back. So I think it would help in a lot of ways, including the jail population.
Thank you.
Sheriff, have the judges complained that we weren't getting our inmates up there?
They complain on a sporadic basis that they're ready for a docket, and we don't have people up there. Now, we hear from them. Our sergeants and our lieutenant over there hear from them when we're not moving fast enough. And it varies judge by judge, week by week. There are some judges that like to run, the rocket docket as fast as they can go. And then there are other judges who work at a slower pace. But there are times that they're waiting on us, no doubt about it.
The issue with the speed on bringing people up through the courts, Michael Morton Act has already impacted the speed of us handling people in the courts, simply because of the of the need to document all the evidence that we turn over to the defense attorneys. So we are picking up a little more people in our jails now, and some of that is caused because of Michael Morton. And so, we need to take that in consideration also, because it's not that they can handle, courts can handle a whole bunch of cases a lot faster because the inmates are not getting up there, but it's the fact that by the time the inmates get up there, there's certain things that the district attorney's office has to provide to the defense attorney, and we have to log that, catalog it, and make sure that we keep a trail on not only what we give the defense attorneys, but also when we give them that. So we're going to see a general slowdown anyway. It has nothing to do with operations of the sheriff's department or the courts. It is simply that new statute that passed.
I think.
I'm not sure with your comments if you're speaking for or against this proposal.
I'm just telling you that we're not going to see as many inmates being taken into court to be handled as fast as they have in the past because of this Michael Morton Act.
I think we have spent a great deal of money preparing this holding area that used to be the old kitchen for use to increase the flow of inmates to the court system. And I'd like to be able to see us take advantage of that new arrangement. I would be inclined to, if not, go ahead and fund these positions now, then to at least keep them on the to-be-considered document. J.D., I'll leave that up to you.
I'd like to make a motion now that we approve these 4 positions.
I'll second the motion.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you all very much.
Thank
you.
Sheriff.
Thank you, Dee.
Constable Precinct 1.
They have no issue.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. I'm just looking at their. Hold on, I'm going to go through the revenue here for just a second. Their revenue's up about 41,000. So, any other discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Constable Precinct 2.
Oh, they have no issue.
Move for approval.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Precinct 3.
Oh, he's satisfied.
Move for approval.
Let me say something right quick. We sent the worksheet out to y'all on Wednesday. There have been a few adjustments that we added to that on Thursday and Friday after discussions with the departments. This is one of the departments that we did make an additional adjustment on. We're removing some of the part-time salaries, which we've used while we've been in 2 separate buildings, been in some limbo due to the construction. So we funded the additional security bailiff position, so we're backing off on the temporary salaries here. And this set an initial.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Again, just this, his revenue is the highest of all the constables, and I think a lot of that has to do with the foreclosures. Is that true, Debbie?
Tax sales.
It's up, they're estimating that to be up $92,000, and it's a little less than what we're projecting for 2014, so good job. Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Precinct 4.
They have no issue.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Precinct 5.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Precinct 6.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Precinct 7?
Precinct 7, we have added a little bit of temporary salaries there, an additional $4,000 in related benefits since you saw the spreadsheet.
Thank you. Move for approval.
Second.
A motion is second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Precinct 8?
Is anybody from 8 here? I have a comment about precinct 8. I have to find the spreadsheet right here. It really impacts all the constables, but they're a precinct that's on the verge of hitting the benchmarks of where we consider an additional position. But one of the things we started looking at is what is there between constable statistics and JP stats that we can interconnect. And I'm sorry, I'm trying to pull up a spreadsheet. And the one thing we focused on is evictions or forcibles. Because in the JP world, a private process server could serve any civil paper. While they might be able to also serve a eviction, a landlord-tenant paper, you don't find that happening too often. So we focused on the constable's reports and the JP stats that are reported to OCA. If you'll look here in front of you, they're looking at a 6-month period, which was October through March of the JP stats. There were 13,224 landlord-tenant cases filed. There were 19,422 eviction papers served. Significant difference between those two stats, and I expected them to be very close together. You can see there's only one constable, precinct 2, that's really even close to that number. They're still 16% more. So I've asked to meet with the constables the next time they have an organized meeting, so we can walk through what goes through in accumulating these statistics and see if we can't get those numbers closer to each other. Some of the things I found out is that while a landlord-tenant case in a JP court, one case is filed, but if there's multiple names on the lease, then there's a paper generated for all of those names. Now, those 3 papers, and I'm assuming 3 here, those 3 papers are served at one time to anybody that answers the door that's over 16 years old. In any type of paper, there's an alternative service request that can be made, especially true in evictions. So we want to make sure that they're not being counted when there's as returned when they're asking for the alternate service. And we want to make sure that we're not counting all of these multiple papers for additional defendants because their name's on the lease. So we're going to step back and talk to the constables about that a little bit and see if we can't ratchet these numbers a little closer together. And if we find in the meantime that in particular Precinct 8 needs additional resources, we will gladly come back and address that. I don't think it'll be before we start the next budget year, but I'm just letting you know that there's someone that we're watching as we perfect this process a little bit.
Any questions?
I just want to clear up the fact that you say you're watching, that you're not accusing them of any sort of wrongdoing.
No, because
She's just trying to understand the differences.
Just trying to understand, because you can see they're not the highest difference.
For the record, I just want to make sure that it is clear
It is
that
clear.
you're not accusing them of any wrongdoing.
No, the 2 highest are actually precincts 5 and 6.
Yet you waited till 8 to surface this problem.
Oh, well, there's no intention there whatsoever. It just happened to be the only thing I could link together.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion, a second. Any further discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Medical Examiner's Office.
I did not hear from them.
I didn't hear from Dr. Pirwani this year.
I don't think he's in town.
I did hear from Dr. Pirwani about an IT issue. His lab inventory management or whatever, software that he was promised in the 14 budget year, and we didn't fund it. And Now, it's not recommended for funding again in this particular budget year. I would like to put that software on the to-be-considered list so that we can take it up after we have completed discussion of the entire budget and see where we are.
How much money is it?
In total, I believe
800,000.
it's $800,000.
But it's really 1.6. It's something that would have to be funded over 2 years.
It's a life information management software.
Right.
The IT steering committee went through the official evaluation process. Unfortunately, that project was ranked low among the priorities. As a result, it was not recommended.
So when he says it was promised, it wasn't. The IT steering committee did not set it as a high enough priority, so it wasn't like that it was promised and we didn't.
I think what was promised in FY14 was between Dr. Pirwani and the previous IT director. I don't think any of the rest of us knew anything about that promise.
Be that as it may, it's the only strategic IT project that was not recommended for funding. And if we have the additional money that we can fund that project this year, I'd like for us to consider doing so.
I don't have a problem with putting it on the holdover list.
Yep, let's put
And
it on
approve
hold.
the rest of the budget.
But I just want to make a record, be clear here. Whatever promise that was mentioned, I don't think the former IT steering committee, the IT CIO, had any authority in making any promise. Okay? This court did not make any commitment or promise to the medical examiner's office about the LIM software.
Who did?
My comment stands. If we've got the money to consider funding it, I'd like to consider funding it,
I think we've got it.
regardless of who said what to whom.
I think we've got it on the considered budget, and we have a motion and a second to approve the remaining budget items. Is there any further discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Fire marshal.
He has no issues.
Move approval.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Community supervision.
No issues.
Move approval.
Second.
A motion and a second. Discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Pretrial services.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Juvenile services.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
323rd District Court.
No issues.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
We're now going to go into the community services section, public health. I will make one comment on public health. That budget was submitted to the hospital district, and it was included in their workshop the other day, and there were no questions as it related to the details of the budget, and it was approved.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. With regards to professional services, that's showing to go up $198,000. Can someone speak a little bit to that?
I think that is the,
1115 waiver, maybe?
no, there's a 5-year behavioral risk assessment that's done.
That's it.
And I think we're in that year to update that assessment.
I have
Correct?
a point of clarification to ask here. Perhaps I'm inaccurate, but I heard somewhere from a legal perspective that we might have some legal challenge in funding public health from the hospital district tax revenue. Am I mistaken, or?
I don't believe I have not heard the funding issue.
I don't know where that came from.
I must be mistaken.
I heard that.
Where'd you hear it from?
As long as there's a courthouse, then somebody is going to be willing to sue for something.
Do we have a motion second?
We did, yes, sir.
Any other discussion? Please vote. Motion passes
We'll run that
unanimously.
track later.
Human Services.
They are represented, but I believe there are no issues. Thank you.
Move approval.
Second.
A motion second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Child Protective Services.
No issues.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Yeah. Ms. Snyder wants to, let me, you want to start it?
Sure.
Okay. We had received a request from Cowboy Santas. It is not in the budget, and it
Cowboy Santas.
it is a program where there is, it's run through the city of Fort Worth, but it also it encompasses the entire county. And
It's run through the CAP Council, JD, the CAP Council.
Will we look that up? What does that stand for, Karen? Thank you.
Community Action Partners.
Program.
The city puts in about $300,000 to $350,000 a year. They have other cities that contribute. They went and looked at how they're being, who's using the program, and there's been a request to the county that we've been asked to fund about $16,600 into that program. It covers the unincorporated area of the kids that get it in some of the smaller towns.
Now, looking at their documentation, what they're really asking for is, GK's right, the 16%, and the dollar amount. But they're really asking for us to contribute not only for unincorporated, but all cities' participation, with the exception of Arlington and Fort Worth.
That's correct.
So it's all the other cities in Tarrant County. And they are funded primarily from the city of Fort Worth through their CAP program.
But we've already got 30,000 allocated for CAP.
For this? No,
Well, we've got it for public.
CAP, that's correct. CAP. Directly to CAP. How they use it, we don't. They use it toward rents.
Was that 16 included in this?
No, sir, we got that we got this last week.
And what exactly do they do?
They make sure that children that are not going to have a Christmas, that they have presents on Christmas Day.
Well, we'll have multiple organizations that do that. If we funded one organization and not others,
I might ask if we could put this to be
To
considered.
be considered, I agree.
Yes, because we need to give you all more information. This is just, I apologize.
And why are the other cities not choosing to participate?
I don't think they've contacted all the other cities.
But the amount you're asking for is for the unincorporated
Well,
area,
it's
not other
that in the
cities.
smaller cities. The only cities that are participating now that are participating in the funding is Fort Worth and Arlington. And about $16,000 worth of expenditures are related to kids outside of those two cities. That would be the best way of saying it, including the incorporated area.
So in effect, we're being asked to do all the unincorporated area in all of the cities except Fort Worth and Arlington.
Right, for $16,000. Yeah, let me do
Put it on
this.
the to be considered.
Yeah.
And the structure of the CAP Council is that the cities of Fort Worth and Arlington are represented on the board. The rest of the county is represented by JD's office and mine.
Any other items on there that,
Just a brief comment about United Way. I'm sorry. Senior citizens. This would have been the last year of funding in a cycle to decrease their funding request from years ago by 25%. This year we got information from senior citizens of their need to increase that to 49,000, and I'm paraphrasing here because I didn't bring that documentation with me. But basically, they're having trouble getting their seed money that they use for match for other grants.
It's for the meals, I think it's for the meals portion of their grant, and
Correct.
it has to go through a governmental entity. Previously, we have, I believe, funded that through our community development, through our Tarrant County Housing Finance Corporation. And so and even that corporation is not an eligible corporation to draw down a federal government grant. And so we're budgeting it here to allow us to be able to pull down, I think, approximately $900,000 worth of federal match on that deal. So that's why you see that go up from what I guess had been 25,000 up to 49,000.
Plus, our bucket's sort of drying up on the housing finance.
Right, that's going to provide us a little bit of flexibility over on the housing finance, I believe.
I wonder if there are any more of those requests that we have for the Housing Finance Corporation that we're not going to be able to address through that fund that might be appropriate to be considered here.
I think what we could do is say that there'll be some things, we might have some to-be-considereds coming from that.
There's a couple of them that Glenn and I have visited about in trying to come up with something for the housing finance to consider at the next meeting.
I'm glad y'all are looking at that.
Yeah.
And so I think that as far as a matching one, I believe this is the only one that's matching and would pull down significant dollars from that standpoint. So I think at least with regards to the ones that we're seeing here, but we could always put a to be considered and bring, as we're going to do with the 16-6, and maybe bring others back after we've had a chance as a group to talk about the housing.
Has there been a motion on this? I'll make a motion to that effect, that we put in abeyance the 16, was it 16,000?
16.6.
16.6, and leave it open for any others after we have the discussion on housing finance.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Just one more quick comment. There is an organization that we're recommending the elimination of funding. It's an organization we've been watching for years, and they've changed their mission dramatically from when we first started funding them.
What item are you on?
I'm still on public assistance, I'm sorry.
Thought we just approved that one.
I wanted to make comment. I just wanted to make sure you were aware of it. They've actually changed their names now. So it was decreased several years ago from 12,000 to 6. This is youth collaboration. But they simply changed their mission from where they were when we first started funding this organization, which was a group that collaborated with all the youth groups out there to make sure that there weren't any duplication of services. Far
Okay.
past that.
Thank you.
When we fund these positions, do we track the performance, or we just
We
basically?
get reports from them. We get reports from them annually.
Okay.
We've been watching it for years.
Texas Ag.
Joan?
Move approval. Do y'all agree with what's here? Yes. I move approval.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Veterans.
No issues.
Move for approval.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Historical Commission. No changes.
Move for approval.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Resource Connection.
No issues.
Move approval.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
We're now going to move to the judicial section. Civil Courts.
First, 4, 17, 48, 67, and 96 have no issues.
Move approval.
All four.
All four.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Did not hear from the 141st, the 153rd, but I'm assuming there are no issues.
Move for approval of 141st and 153rd District Courts.
Second. A motion is second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
236 has no issues.
Move for approval.
Second.
A motion is second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
342nd.
342nd, 348 have no issues.
Move for approval of both.
Second.
A motion is second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
352nd, anybody here? No issues?
Move for approval.
Second.
A motion is second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. They're leaving like
231st.
Move approval.
Second.
a motion is second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
233rd.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion is second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Let me ask a question. Is there anybody from the family courts here? I say, if you want to take a motion on 322nd, 324th, 325th, 360th, do that at one time?
I move for approval.
Second.
A motion is second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
And as we're talking about all the courts, and I know you're all aware, we still have the issue of the court coordinator's salary structure pending. Anybody here from county court at law? If you'd like to take county court number one, county court at law number 1, 2, and 3 together, that would be appropriate.
Move for approval.
Second.
A motion is second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Probate courts.
Probate courts, I guess I can say that. Probate court number 1 and 2.
Move for approval.
Second.
A motion is second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
We're now entering the criminal court, so Mr. Shugart is here to answer any questions.
I'll save you quite a bit of time, but I wanted to note two things during the discussion. One, there was a discussion about attorney fees. I want you to know that all 20 criminal courts, due to the new implementation of our automated payment system, are evaluating fees and what they're charging and how they're charging it. We don't know the impact it will have on the budget. We understand what's been appropriated, and I believe the judges will try to stay within those bounds.
I guess the question that was mentioned earlier was the possibility of board certification and that having some impact.
That has been a discussion point, but the judges as a whole have not voted on that issue.
And I guess the question is, do we have plenty of folks who are indicating that they're willing to be a part of the wheel?
Yeah, we have over 200 people on the wheel at this time.
So there's certainly no indication based upon that number that they feel like they're totally underpaid?
You'd have to speak to the defense bar on that. But
You got 200 people who are willing to be paid based upon whatever schedule the judges have thus far set.
yes, sir, that's correct.
So that would imply that you've got,
That would be one conclusion you could draw, sir.
Thank you.
And then there was a discussion earlier that GK was discussing the Michael Morton Act. On August 20th, the judges are getting together with the Office of Court Administration, trying to and invited the defense bar, the potential elected candidates, and pretrial services and the sheriff's office to look at the impact of the Michael Morton Act on our current case flow system. There's a flow of cases, how quickly digital media evidence gets to the courts, to make sure that we're not asking for prisoners to be brought to the courtroom when they're not prepared to make a plea or declare themselves ready for trial. So we're addressing that issue.
My only other comment, and you might be fixing to hit this, we have an unprecedented situation facing us in January, and that is we will have 5?
We'll have 5 new judges.
In the criminal court system. So from Greg's perspective, we have to be ready to potentially maybe double fill some court coordinator positions, depending on what kind of retirements or turnover there might be there. We've got a small amount in the budget for that. Whether it's sufficient or not, we don't know yet.
And
so we will
address it as we know more.
And part of our goal in working with the existing judges and our current court administration staff is to bring all these new judges online as quickly as possible to ensure there's continuity in the way we handle cases and they're not an issue with the jail population due to docket. And then
So what kind of training do you have set up for these 5 rookies?
We're planning on having judges school, working with Judge Carr as our senior judge in the county criminal courts, because 4 of them represent, or 4 of our new judges are at the county criminal court level, and they've never actually had a case flow management plan in place, and so our goal is to try to have something in place. They haven't had a dashboard that the public can see the status of dockets. We plan to have all that in place prior to January 1 so that these new judges will have the tool to understand their docket, to be able to manage their docket, to ensure that cases continue to move through
Would
the
you be
system.
sure that one of the courses or one of the segments that you have, that you train them on are fines,
Yes.
revenue?
They'll
So
be,
that they do understand that they've got some ability to help us with that?
we'll ensure and incorporate that, sir.
The only other thing is, of course, Greg mentioned that ACMS and some of the technology that CUC's been working on should be implemented during the next year. Implementation of any system is huge to start off with, and you're dealing with 10 different courts, 20 different courts, plus the magistrate court. We've included up to $50,000 in Mr. Schumer's budget to assist with whatever he may need to help with that implementation, whether it's part-time salaries, professional services. Again, we're just not there to know the answer to that totally.
And so we have a huge cultural change that's going to happen in the Tim Curry Criminal Justice Building, and we need to be prepared for it. And that being said,
Plus, half your buddies are going to be leaving that building and heading in another direction.
that is correct. And I'm sure Mr. Phillips will be discussing in the next few weeks about what the proposal is changing that building.
How many auxiliary coordinators do you have in the criminal area?
There are currently 5 auxiliary court coordinators.
So that just happens to be the same number of judges that you have rookies coming in, so maybe they could help a little bit with this.
That is the plan, sir. They are going to help tremendously.
So we might not have to grant all of that 5 double pay while we're vacationing our term.
We will continue to provide stewardship over the county funds, ensure that we're not double spending when we don't have to, sir.
Thank you.
And that being said, all the budgets under the criminal courts umbrella were fine.
County and criminal?
County and
I mean,
criminal.
district and?
District criminal and all the ones that I'm directly responsible for, sir.
Could you have some just cursory discussion with your county criminal judges about the wide variance in the fees?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
So does that include magistrate court?
And it goes all the way down through, hold on,
Criminal court support?
through 42211 through County Criminal Court number 10.
Which is what page in our?
Oh, I don't know about the page, I'm sorry.
2, 3, 4, 5. I think the districts are taking us through 108. That's court
Through
magistrate.
page 123,
So that included his area.
correct. Magistrate, criminal court administration, grand jury, criminal attorney appointments, mental health court, criminal courts, felony court.
So the temporary or part-time that you have under his court, criminal court administration, that $90,000 increase, 50 of that is for this quote-unquote? Okay. Council fees,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
criminal court number 2, you've increased the council fees by 70,000, is there?
Criminal court number 2. CCC.
County criminal court number 2.
I mean, we're just playing that off the trends, what we see is the activity in that court.
Okay,
And that's true for council fees in most boards. Then we step back and look at the picture as a whole.
okay. So it's through 123.
Page 123, correct.
Does that include grand jury?
Yes. So to be specific, it is page 97 through 123.
We need a motion or a second.
Move approval.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Justices of the Peace, Precinct 1.
Now, if we're gonna, and again, my only question that I would ask y'all to carry back to the JPs is some discussion with regards to the fees and fines, because I do know that in 2012, we had a discussion about this, and the thought process was that those were going to be going up, and in every instance, when you look at the net amount, they've gone down. When you combine fees and fines, they've gone down. And
Judge Wright back there wants to speak.
okay.
Come on.
Would you go ahead and please come forward?
These are reports pulled from our Odyssey system comparing the fiscal years from 2010 through 2013. We show revenue up 85%.
Well, according to the budget office and what we actually received in 2012 to 2015 estimate, it's down in every case.
I can't
So
tell
Debbie,
you
what's the problem?
Well, I think probably part of the difference is that those are all fees and fines associated with JP activities, so it includes constable fees, which are separate. You've looked at that separately. It includes state of Texas fees. So
That's the
when you
big
carve those
picture.
things out, what's left are the JP fees and fines.
So how do we determine when it's, what goes to the state and what stays here, and why would ours be down and the state's be up so much?
I haven't specifically seen that piece of paper, but the fees by the state of Texas are set. That's all there is to it. And they are collected separately and individually on each case, if applicable.
But aren't our fees and fines collected off each case?
They are, but those
So
are,
if the states go up, if that number has gone up, it would imply to me that the cases, and in fact, the case filings, no, the case filings are showing to have gone down.
That's correct.
So are there fees and fines that we should be looking at raising?
well, the fines themselves are up to the discretion of the judge, totally. The
State fees, we have no control over.
State fees and county fees for constable fees and so forth are set, court reporter fees are set by statute also.
Okay, so the constable,
Constable fees, we have some discretion over.
so it sounds as though then that while the state may have been going up, y'all have either not increased your fees or decreased your fees here at the county level.
No, sir. Our fees have been adjusted accordingly. That's the reason you're seeing an 85% increase.
But Jacqueline, we're not seeing an 85% increase in the county's numbers.
Judge, it's your computer system and it's your report. I don't know how you chop the pie up, but it's our pie.
Well, we're getting a whole lot smaller part of your pie.
I don't have access to those numbers. I have no way of looking at those numbers. All I can do is pull the numbers from our Odyssey system.
Can I see that piece of paper?
Here.
I just wanted to share that information with you.
Well, and I want to figure out what the difference is, because according to the revenue that we got from the auditor, our revenue is down by 39, 60, 72, 88, 100,000 in fees, and
I can't speak to the fines and fees, but I can tell you that the numbers, the case filing numbers, there has been some problem with the accuracy of those numbers, going to both, from the budget office to the OCA. Is that correct? Did I say that correctly, GK?
No.
I think so.
I think you were having issues between auditor's office and OCA, what you report to OCA.
On the numbers don't match project that we discussed a couple of months ago?
why don't we look at that and get back to us? I mean, it doesn't really impact the budgets and stuff like that, but it does impact our revenue budgets. And the revenue, again, according to the auditor's office, is down about $150,000 from 10, or from 12 to 15.
You know, Your Honor, I think you have an excellent idea. We need to pull a group together from the JPs and from audit and budget in our office to take a look at this to try to determine, what the accurate numbers are. And we're not saying that one is correct and one isn't. We just need to find out what the numbers are.
And just to be fair, when you're looking at the fines at the county criminal court, that is stripped of everything except the fine itself. Just as when you're looking at the fines for JP, it is only the fine. Their fees.
Well, I'm looking at fees too.
I know. The fees are up in the fee section, and for the
Right.
county criminal court, it's in the county clerk's office.
My whole point is that we are very cognizant. I mean, we're not about the money, but it's a reality. And we're very cognizant of those numbers, and that's the reason I keep a close eye on those numbers. So,
And Your Honor, if that's the direction of the court, then our office will take the lead in bringing those groups together and reporting back to the court.
Well, I'd like to, personally, I'd like to find out what the difference is, and if the state's up 85 and we're down, then I'd like to see if we can't reconcile that and figure out what the reason is for that.
Yeah.
Are the JPs okay with the budget still?
I think Russ has some issues.
JP3, Your Honor, could we get a vote on JP 1 and 2? There's no changes requested.
Move approval.
Second.
A motion is second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. I thought you were 3.
I'm Russ Casey. I'm from JP Precinct 3. I had a request. It has to do with the new courthouse that's being built. I'm requesting that we get some computers and a fax machine for it. Evidently, it's been missed on some other budgets. I have this.
You may be getting into some of your spa money here.
I'll do it. I got it. Okay. Thank you, Judge.
So I guess let me explain a little bit about what happened to kind of give you a background, because this is kind of an unusual thing. When the Hearst Courthouse was decided to be remodeled, we looked at starting a new, or moving the court operations to a temporary location. And what we decided to do instead, in order to save the county a substantial amount of money, was to consolidate during the construction period the 2 offices into one location, and that being in South Lake. Now, first off, the computers that we have were there when I took office. They're about a decade old. But we were trying to utilize those in
Russ,
order
let me
to
stop you for just a second and say that we go through a refresh on our computers, and I don't know of any place in this county that's using 10-year-old computers.
2009.
Okay, so you missed it by about 5 years.
No, they were there when I took office. I think there was a RAM upgrade that was done in 2009. I think that's what you're looking at. No,
But is this something that's, this is not in the, Chris, is this not in your IT budget?
No.
It went through there, but they denied it.
What happened?
I think we need some clarification first.
Rick Brunson and I had an extended phone conversation on Friday with Judge Casey, trying to understand what it was that he needed. In the end, it sounded like what the request is to have complete duplicate equipment at both locations. They have 8 employees. They wanted equipment for 8 employees at South Lake and 8 employees at Hearst. As we talked, we thought that was a bit extensive and that couldn't be recommended, but we wanted to step back and get a better picture of his business process.
That is absolutely, completely far off from the truth.
And one of the things we even talked about, if his employees are that mobile, maybe we need to look at laptops for all of them, with 2 docking stations at each location, instead of having duplicate equipment at both locations. And I told him we didn't think we could get to a resolution from our conversation on Friday. And of course, we're here first thing Monday morning. So.
Why don't we hear from the judge, if I may, please?
Sure.
I guess let me backtrack to where we were, because I think it's important that you have the background of the information. So we decided to consolidate the 2 offices into 1 office. And at the same time, we were trying to utilize some advances in technology that we've had. So we took the computers from the Hearst, we brought them over to South Lake. The first thing we did was replace the computer in the courtroom that the city of South Lake took with them when they moved their municipal court. So that put that empty spot up. Then we put another computer up at the front window, so that when one of the clerks is helping someone at the window, they can bring up a case right there instead of having to go back to their desk and then go back forward, keep running back and forth. We try to, we figured that'd help move along the process. Then we set up the computers for each of the workstations that the employees were using. So when we are looking at separating back into Hearst, we are still wanting to leave the computer at the window in South Lake because it really has helped our efficiency an awful lot. We are still wanting to leave a couple of workstations open so that I can move employees back and forth, because though we have no court cases in Hearst right now, it's hard to completely staff it for as much as what we expect in 6 months when we're still working as many people in South Lake while the transition occurs. Court cases don't happen overnight. You file it and it takes a few months, and so we're going to have a transition period. We're wanting to leave a couple of workstations open so we can have a floating personnel, if we will. And I can understand that budget thought about buying new laptops for that particular position, but I really didn't want to put my employees in a position of having to take care of a laptop. And then that also is going to allow the utilization of a flexibility over a period of time. That leaves us approximately 3 computers that we could possibly take back, computers that I'm hoping that we just replace. That's why I was wanting to go ahead and get the 8. What that 8 is that's 1 for the front window in Hearst, which we did not have before, and we really like that concept of being able to help someone right there at the window. That is 4 for the clerks that we are planning on utilizing at that location, 1 for the chief clerk and 1 for myself. The fax machine that we're asking for, previously in South Lake, the constable's office and the JP office were utilizing 1 fax machine and 1 fax number. When we moved over, we got a new fax number, and so we put our fax machine from Hearst at that location. I don't really think it would be a good idea after we've tried to train everybody what our new fax number is to eliminate that fax number and take that fax machine back. So, I mean, fax machines are pretty cheap. I was just wanting to get a new fax machine so that we can reutilize that at Hearst. But that's what I was asking for. Now, we put that back in request back in February through the IT department, and it was later denied, but what we were wanting then is there is a dedicated tax, it's the JP Technology Fund, that can only be used for technology for the JP courts. You can't use the money for anything else. So we thought workstations would be a really good utilization of that money. I'm not exactly certain why it was denied. I know there's been some talk that they were wanting me to get the other 7 JPs to approve it, but I haven't had a chance to talk to them about this particular situation yet. But I wasn't even aware of this until a couple of weeks ago that we weren't going to have computers, and so I was trying to fumble this through and get some kind of budget approval so that we'd be able to send people to work there when the new courthouse is open.
Debbie? Response?
Well, like I said, we had a long discussion on Friday, and by the way, here's a list of the inventory that's assigned to JP3. There was concern that there was equipment that was gotten rid of when they consolidated out South Lake, and we do have that equipment that was excess because they had combined offices. And truly, the way, and Rick, you were there, if I'm misstating this, please speak up, is that we needed to step back and look at their business processes and try to eliminate as much duplication of equipment as possible, because we're very conscientious of that. We have too many situations where we have someone that has a desktop and a laptop. When you can only use one at one time, we still are paying license agreements and on everything that's on that second piece of equipment. And we talked about the fact that, and I didn't mention this earlier, we received late in the process a list from purchasing of a whole lot of copiers that need to be replaced. We're also conscientiously trying to combine network printing, faxing, and scanning where possible on a single piece of equipment and eliminate equipment that IT is having to maintain right now. Since we were unable to piece together where all of these copiers are, I told Judge Casey that we need to step back and look and see if there's copiers in one of those that needs to be replaced, and we combine faxing all with the copier, if it's appropriate. We don't know where it's going to be located to make sure that it's handily located so they know when a fax comes in or not. The other thing that's available, and we did not speak to this is WriteFax, where the fax comes straight into a desktop as opposed to going to a separate fax machine. And there's a lot of courts that are utilizing that now.
So you're suggesting that an overall look county-wide of the copiers and possibly saying that the copier could become the scanner, the printer, the copier, and the fax machine.
Correct.
So it could do all 4 functions. Because I see we're talking about 9 printers, 13 scanners, and I don't know how many fax machines we might have.
Well, they probably currently, it sounds like they have 1 fax machine. But
So why don't we put this request on the to be considered and let the 3 of y'all continue to discuss it a little bit and come back at a later point in time.
We also might want to hear from our IT person who works with Russ and Rosalie.
Is she here?
no.
Okay. You might include Rosalie in that discussion. Thank you, Judge.
All right, thank you very much.
Do we need to make a motion?
To approve his budget as it is right now, and then just know that the capital will be considered.
I move we approve his budget and consider this at a later date.
Second.
A motion, a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
JP4.
Approval.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
JP5.
They may be here.
Move approval.
No issues.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
JP6.
No issues.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
JP7.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
JP8.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
We're now going to go to the Criminal District Attorney's Office.
Just
I
have a
would
quick-
suggest that we have a short break.
I think maybe, oh,
I second.
Thank you.
Okay, we can now move to the Criminal District Attorney's Office.
I have one quick comment. Mr. Mania spoke earlier about the impact of Senate Bill 1611, in particular the discovery process. There's been a large impact on the DA's office as we have to make available immediately digital media evidence. And so we're still trying to address some best practices issues on how to duplicate that equipment. The district attorney's office is looking at possibly temporary employees. We're looking at some key equipment, but as of yet, we don't have a resolution on that. But I just want to tell y'all that we will continue to work diligently with the DA's office in whatever we need to make that process efficient and effective. And we'll come back with something whenever it is known, whether or not it's before this budget starts or not, it will be addressed.
And you're consulting with the new district attorney?
When
The
necess-
district attorney elect?
Elect when necessary, yes, but I also know that there's quite a bit of internal communication going on with the DA's office.
Good.
Also.
Just
So
wanted to
that
make
being-
sure she was in the loop.
Yes. That being said, District Attorney's Office, do you have any issues? No.
Normally, I would hear from the district attorney's office, but I have not heard a word of anything this year.
Because there's
So
no issues.
I will move approval of their budget.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
District Clerk.
Now we can balance the budget.
Now we got that deal.
Wait, repeat that?
We are in agreement with the budget office.
And if you'll notice, we
My
have
goodness.
one piece of equipment that we've added back to our initial recommendation for a shredder.
Move approval of the district clerk's budget.
I have a question for the Honorable Tom Waller. Would you come up front, sir?
Oh, he'll be happy to.
I knew it was too good to be true. Go ahead.
What, you know the status on the passport facility?
I emailed them last week to give me an update. As you know, they've,
Who is them?
Todd Martin and the guy in Cornyn's office.
Okay.
Have not heard back from them, but I haven't been in the office today, so.
Okay.
They're going to work on it. Senator Cornyn assured me he was putting his personal attention on this.
Maybe a personality conflict. You might ought to handle that.
That's been
Well, I've already gotten deep into it.
The commissioner's been a big help. That it?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Don't you get your emails by BlackBerry like the rest of us?
I don't get, not on,
Do you have those employees and what you need in this budget?
yes. Assuming they
So we need to take.
approve.
Not gonna get it.
Otherwise, they won't be in it.
Oh, we're gonna get it.
We have a motion.
Second.
We now have a second. Any further discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
County Clerk.
Good morning. We just want to say we're satisfied with the recommendation, and we want to thank Debbie and Kara for working with us with the budget and throughout the year, and we're good.
Move approval.
Thank you.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Domestic Relations.
Move approval.
Second.
They have no issues.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Jury Services.
Talked to Ms. Morales this morning. She is on vacation, but she had no issues. I would like to point out a couple of things. That's in jury services. For the first time, we will be contracting out the printing of jury summons themselves. Right now, we've been pre-printed form, buying pre-printed forms. Then IT actually fills in the blank from the jury will information. By outsourcing them, we'll get a better rate on postage, and we'll also be able to change any wording that might be necessary on the fly on the summons itself. Paula has put a great deal of research into it. Now, I want to be upfront with you. The cost initially is about $30,000 more a year, but we think it will end up being a more effective, efficient process. And hopefully, the biggest thing we're going to get out is the verification of addresses. Right now, all the return mail on a jury summons has to be hand-fed into the jury system. The company that we're outsourcing with will actually electronically feed that information back into the jury system, eliminating some personnel costs. We've made a small reduction in their temporary salaries. We think in the long run, we'll see that even bigger. The other thing that we are going to start is text messaging.
Well, hold on just a second. You said the cost initially to outsource these summons. The cost initially is an extra $30,000 a year.
Right.
Is that a one-time cost or is that an annual cost?
It's an annual cost. It's an annual
how long?
cost. Well, it depends on how, the more jurors that we reach on the first attempt, i.e. a good address, which now that's going to be scrubbed behind the scenes for us, then the fewer number of summonses that we will have to send out to get the appropriate number of jurors. So as we see a higher show-up rate, then we will probably start eliminating the number of summons that we have to send out. Plus, we're going to start saving some internal manpower, and I'm going to say that that's through some of the temporaries that we use right now, that we'll see that dollar amount diminish after we go through the first cycle of outsourcing the summons. The most important thing, though, is that we will be able to change information. If we find out there's street closures around LaGrave Field, then we can add that comment on there. You know, if we find out anything that's pertinent to the jury that we're summoning that week.
So you expect to be able to realize these savings after one, at the most two budget cycles?
We do. We have high hopes of that.
Okay, thank you.
Now, the other thing that we're going to do is start text messaging for those online jury panels who, in particular, are dismissed prior to them reporting. We still have jurors that are showing up, even though the jury has been dismissed. There's an email that goes to them, but what we believe to be facts is that they're far quicker to check a text message than they are a email.
So where are we getting these email and cell phone
Those are from the online
addresses?
registrations. If they have registered online, then they are impaneled online, likely impaneled online. And if we find out the jury trial is no longer necessary, then the jurors are dismissed before they ever report. But we have continued to see jurors report even though they have been dismissed via email.
Sounds very exciting.
I mean, there are some interesting aspects of what they're looking at, and we appreciate them being very progressive with their e-government.
Sounds like an e-government issue.
Congratulations. I think it's going to be, and I do agree. I think the texting, they're a whole lot more likely to look at that text.
That's right.
from that perspective.
And to get right,
You even look at text, don't you?
Absolutely.
See,
so,
I rest my.
You know, if you're not careful, you're going to be accused of coming into the world of technology.
No?
No,
that
he
won't
won't.
happen.
Okay.
one more. And just another note, there are 2 new positions included in jury services budget. There will be a second jury room in the civil courts building, but it will only be staffed for dismissals. Panels will still either be an online panel or they will be called to the central jury room. But anybody from the buildings on this end of town, courthouse, family law, civil courts, will actually be dismissed from the civil courts building.
So how long is the walk from the central jury room to the civil courts building?
Well, it takes less than 5 minutes, but it's probably about 5 blocks. 6 blocks? Thank you, Mr. Wilder.
You haven't been walking it as many times as you need to be.
And of course, the biggest benefit for those jurors for judges is the use of online panels. Not all of them are using it. Some they have they have their own preferences.
So wait a minute, I want to go back to that. So you're saying that some of the judges are not using the online panels?
It's my understanding.
Why?
Some may think you get a different demographic mix. You know, people that online register might tend to be younger as opposed to those who actually report in person. I don't know. That's speculation on my part.
We could get into a whole nother discussion about that, but I won't at this point in time.
This is jury services.
Yes, sir.
Move approval of jury services.
Second.
We have a motion to second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Special judges?
The next 2 are actually budgets that we prepare every year. Special judges is just for substitute court reporters who are on vacation or sick, and visiting judges for the district courts.
So the
Courts and judiciary is just an overhead, and overall there is no issues there. Any large increase that you see there for counsel fees in courts and judiciary is that becomes a holding area for some of our counsel fees to be distributed to the courts at a later date.
So the professional service is for the substitute court reporters?
Correct.
Thank you.
So are you suggesting that we vote on both special judges and courts and judiciary together?
Yes, sir.
Move for approval of those 2.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. This kind of breaks, I think, at this point in time. Let me ask one question. It was mentioned earlier about the court coordinators. What is the, have we gotten that, Tina, have we gotten that policy, or Ange, have we gotten that written up? Are we ready to look at that, or is that something we need to address in court?
Have you heard back from the judge yet?
No, I have not. I don't know if, have we heard from the judge at all in regards to whether or not?
We have not yet.
I don't believe we have
So we probably won't discuss that then at this point.
I thought he was going to get back with us before this came up.
That's our understanding, Commissioner. We do have a draft policy ready to go whenever it's appropriate. It's my understanding that we were waiting for a response back from the judges.
Then what I might suggest with the court's approval would be to, first off, let's pass that recommended policy out to the court members.
Okay.
Let's make sure the judges have that, kind of inquire as to where they are. Have they been sent a copy of this?
I don't believe so.
Ange is shaking her head no.
No.
They may be waiting for a copy to see exactly how that reads also. So I would suggest that we send that to them, and then from there.
We'll do that today.
Somebody needs to let them know we need a response from them.
We will do that today.
Okay.
Your Honor, I would suggest that we break for lunch at this point, and because the rest of these items are administrative or transportation, which tend to be located in this building.
Okay.
So you want to come back at about
Why don't we come
12:30?
back about 12:30, 12:15, 12:30, 12:30? Let's make it back at 12:30. And there's sandwiches and stuff right back there.
Okay.
Debbie?
That's my newest granddaughter.
We heard that.
She's about 4 months old, I guess. March, let's see, April, May, June, July.
Couldn't figure out why that I was highlighted up there. Where the cursor is.
Where we live? We're starting right here with the administration, the county judge.
Let's go.
Okay, Your Honor, the next department up is the county judge's department.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. This passes unanimously. Let's move on.
County administrator, do we have a motion?
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Non-departmental.
There are no issues, but I do want to note the $150,000 in capital in here is for those copiers that we said we were going to step back and take a look at as we identify them. But we know that there's some, as they break, there's not parts available anymore. But there's no other issues from our standpoint. We have added the additional amount for merit in there that we voted on earlier.
Move approval.
I'll second. So when you add that in there, you add it, are you moving that from, tell me how that works.
Well, in the end, assuming there's no other revenue adjustments, because we'll have one more phase of not only cash, but we'll look at revenues as a whole. Assuming there, and then we'll get the September 1st supplemental tax roll. If there were no other changes to revenues, it would come from undesignated.
Okay, so if we get, we think we're going to end the year at whatever we were said earlier, $77 million in cash carry forward. If we end the year at $84 million in cash carry forward, that's an extra $7 million. So what you're saying at that point, are you simply saying that that our revenue will go up, or what does that end up meaning?
In essence, yes, revenues could go up by a combination of things. Continued look at revenues as a whole, just like we continue to look at budgets. We'll get the September 1st supplemental tax roll.
Okay.
Now, in the scheme of things, I'm not really sure that that will go up all that significantly because TAD is changing software this year, and so they diligently made an effort to get as far as they could through their appeals before the certified tax roll came out on the 25th. And then cash.
And so as this is, if we get to the end of the year and our cash carry forward number, I guess, is larger than what we had originally budgeted, and what that just simply means is, in that current fiscal year, we spent less or collected more, and our net position was better than what we had budgeted. And so with that stream, with that extra amount of money, we talked about in the past as far as the possibility of applying some of that against our unfunded liability. Now, what that, I guess, potentially could do would be for the following year, if we took that extra and we applied it to the following year, it might mean that we might show a deficit in that one particular year by a portion of that amount or all of that amount or maybe none of that amount, depending upon how everybody else budgets. And I mean, typically our departments are very conservative and very efficient with the use of their tax dollars.
We agree.
And so there's usually that amount of excess because they manage it so well.
And again, a large use of our cash is it truly between two things: reserves, true reserves, those that we don't intend to touch, and capital. So every time we tighten that and tighten it and tighten it and get it closer to more perfect when we approve this budget, then our capital funds will start to diminish.
Because we do pay for our capital out of our excess
Correct.
Ending cash and the reserves that we've set. Historically, or at least in the last several years,
For a good while now.
we used to issue COs, and we used to take care of paying those COs off over probably around 5 years. We have, in the last 3, 4, 5 years, paid with that 10 years, paid with that out of our ending capital above what we felt like, our ending cash above what we felt like were appropriate or adequate reserves. So, I think that we need to all be aware of the fact that we do that, and I know that we do, at the same time that all of our elected officials, all of our departments do a very good job of watching their budgets. That allows us to be able to do that. And we want to, I think, it's certainly the feeling of this court, I believe, that we continue to do that and not have to.
Well, and during the economic downturn, we had less issues to deal with in many of the municipalities around us. And I think it's exactly for that reason. Our departments operate very conservatively, by and large.
I think the next legislative session is going to present some challenges that I think we're going to have to be ready for also as we move forward with that. So I think we need to be aware of those as we go forward. So in looking at the non-departmental, is I'm kind of moving from that top of page 161 down. Termination pay, you're keeping that about the same.
About the same. But we are looking at that closely.
The compensation allocation, that's a number that will go up based upon
What we just did.
what we did earlier today.
And that'll end up in the end getting spread to all the departments. Right now, it's just a placeholder right here.
The lump sum,
Tell me what compensation allocation is.
It's the merit and structure.
Oh, okay. All right.
We were trying to be generic because we've gone from calling it PFP to merit, so we decided to take the specifics out of it.
so what you have in the various department budgets or area budgets right now are simply a no increase. Here's what you spent last year.
With the exception of new positions and reclassification.
Right. So once we approve the budget, then, or as they go through the process of the merit and the structure and all the things that we've talked about, this number will leave the non-departmental and go into the various departments at that point in time.
And we actually continue to calculate that number. This is based on July 28th payroll. So we'll do it one more time before September 9th when we approve the budget. It usually goes down a little bit because of retirement terminations, and new hires aren't eligible right away. So it usually goes down. Now that I'm looking at this on this screen, that really doesn't stand for retiree lump sum contribution. This stands for retirement lump sum contribution. Maybe we need to perfect our abbreviation for retirement.
That might be a good idea, because that $6 million represents last year's COLA as well as the $4 million that we sent. And so this year, as a court, we still have to, it's in the budget, it's shown here in the budget, but we still have to make a decision with regards to whether or not we're going to have a COLA. And you will remember a little bit of that discussion, but I think we need to have a more detailed discussion of what the consequences are as far as TCDRS is concerned with that decision. But there is still a matter of another potentially $4 million payment toward our unfunded liability. The workers' comp, you're saying coming down. Let's see, the entire retiree group insurance, tuition. Now, that seems to be down.
It does, and we recognize that. That's the number that HR submits every year. And I probably have some history information on that. I don't know, I have it in a file that's readily available. But no, it tends to be down.
Online service.
And that actually is constables and law enforcement. It's a contract that we have for them to have access to LexisNexis, otherwise known as CLEAR, to do people locate research.
Are we expecting all of a sudden for them to start doing a whole lot more of that?
No. I actually reclassified that from professional services, just so it stands out and is clearer.
Well, it stood out. Capital outlay. Tarrant Appraisal District. We talked about that. Professional services. Casualty insurance.
Of course, that $75,000 on casualty insurance is because we're bringing on the civil courts building and a larger northeast sub-courthouse, primarily.
A lot, is that double? I mean, double or triple in size or something like that?
Now, we are out for bids right now. Good time to bring this up. We're out for bids right now for a broker and agent of record. We did that in my very, very early days of the county. Back then it was Alexander and Alexander, and a company that doesn't even exist anymore.
Right.
And
who is it now?
was no one. We've been writing the bid specs ourselves and going out for bid for all the different lines. And the balance here is by having a broker of record, then the underwriting fees aren't written into the prices that we're paying for lines of insurance. So we're hoping in the scheme of things, at best it comes out a wash. At the worst.
How many?
At worst it comes out a wash. At best we actually get a little bit of savings out of it.
Okay.
So
When are we supposed to get a response in on that?
I don't know what the due date is. I don't think, but they are on the streets. We had the pre-bid conference not long ago.
We have a lot of people show up?
We had a lot of people show up.
Could we go back up to the youth recovery campus? This is something that we've been funding for years and years and years, and I haven't heard anything about them in years and years and years.
Really haven't either.
I know that they continue to be there on Hemp Hill. I think it started off as a male-female, and it very quickly went to just male because of some issues regarding that. But I still believe that is the only facility for adolescents with abuse problems. Otherwise, they end up going to the state hospital.
Because we hadn't heard anything about them, I wasn't sure they were still around.
Oh, yes, they're still there.
Could we get them to come and
Sure.
say something to us about what they're doing these days? Thank you.
I think they're, well, I know that Stevie started out being that. I'm not sure she's still over that particular area, but it's still much, I think, maybe in the MHMR area. So we.
Yeah. I'd just like to hear from them.
Yes, she is.
She's still over there?
She's still there, yes.
And so then the contingency number you've got of the 1.5, that's where you were, that offset the contingency revenue we had earlier, and so.
The two will increase joint.
Okay.
They'll still equal.
What is this $1,000 litigation expense? What kind of
I don't
litigation
know.
expense can we pay with $1,000?
Well, it's usually some sort of court cost. Actually, what we pay out of that, did we charge it there? No, I don't see it.
I mean, you ain't paid anything out of it yet.
Every year from our outside auditors, we have to have a letter for our outside auditors. We have to have letters to
quantify any outstanding litigation that they might think would have a significant impact on the financial statements. And usually we have to get those letters in the event we have any retained counsel on any liability cases.
Okay. Are we not going to increase the contingent liability or
We-
contingent expense
Yeah, we will.
to $5 million?
Yes.
To
That
what?
By doing it here, it kind of artificially distorts things.
Okay, do we have a motion and a second on approval? Okay.
And that's for both general fund and road and bridge. Non-departmental. That's more of a question than a statement.
You know, there's a professional services in non-departmental and road and bridge
What happened, I mean, what is that?
for the transportation plan.
Oh, okay. Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
And yes, that was for both.
Debt service.
Obviously, there's no issues with that. That is our actual debt service interest payment.
How much total debt do we have on the book right now?
331 million.
331 million.
Are we anticipating selling any debt?
Not this year, I don't believe. We try to sell every other year to save issuance costs.
That would be in 16, at the end of 16, if necessary.
Or the end of 15?
It'll be next
End of
August.
15, I'm sorry,
Next
end of
August.
15, thank you. But again, only if necessary.
Okay, so earlier today, we were looking at the change between the M&O and the debt service rate. Is that something we're required to do, or could we have left that the same and just, that would just have accumulated a little bit of extra money inside of our debt service? Okay.
And that's why we leave it at $1 million.
Safe.
Now, you could certainly set aside a rainy day fund on a reserve, but you wouldn't want to leave it in there.
What are we limited to inside of that debt service?
I think it talks about limited, and whenever we establish this $1 million, we discussed it with First Southwest and Bond Council.
So we kind of define that limit, but as a court, we're supposed to define that limit.
No, I'm not saying that.
Well, then I go back to my earlier question. If there is a limit, what is that limit?
It depends on the amount of your debt service, but I'm
Could we kind of at least
yeah,
research that a little
I'll
bit?
get that information for you.
We think it's 1/12, is what I think.
1/12 of the outstanding debt?
1/12 of the payment, right.
1/12 of our payment. Okay, so that could be around $3 million.
Principal and interest? Principal and interest? See, we'll have to.
Okay, if you wouldn't mind.
Do we have a debt payment schedule?
Yes.
Like, do we have
You
that?
want to,
It's in the, I think,
it's in the CAFR, and I
if
can.
you look in the, it's in the notes, I think it highlights the amount of debt that we're supposed to pay every year.
It's in the monthly statement.
And we really, do we have any non-bonded debt right now?
No.
And so everything that would be in that would be just the payments as it pertains to our outstanding bonds.
It's the 98 and the 2006 bond packages, mainly.
Here at the top of this, Commissioner Wynn, I'm sorry, that's not our total debt payment, I'm sorry, wrong file. I have it, I'm just not sure where it is.
Okay. So,
We have a motion and a second, but we have not voted.
No, we don't.
we don't have a motion and a second on this one.
Oh, we don't? Oh,
No.
I'm sorry, I thought that's what you said.
I will move approval of the debt service
Second.
fund.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
County auditor.
We have no issues, so we request your approval.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Budget risk.
Ditto.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Tax assessor.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
And just let me note, there is an adjustment in there, it's in capital. Redaction software, but it was included in your motion.
Elections.
Oh, I'm sorry. They have no issues.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. So, I'm going to ask, even though we've just voted on it. So the postage, I guess because we're not in a primary year is why that's going down. It probably is the reason, contract labor and so on.
All of that has to do with the elections that we're responsible for next year. And of course, even so many of our elections are joint elections now anyway, so we share the cost. But postage is because of voter registration cards.
And the only thing that I guess we haven't, I'm not sure, remember that we have moved a lot of the city and a lot of the other elections to the odd number years.
Right.
So I don't,
Those are contract elections. They're not shown here.
Okay.
This is our portion of any given election that we participate in.
It's the primary and the general.
okay.
Constitutional.
IT administration.
IT has no issues, Chris?
Move approval.
We have a motion.
I have a second with one question, IT. I have one question. The software maintenance under IT app development support, it went from 2.3 million to over 3. Are we expecting to have more software?
What page are you on?
I'm on page 180.
And what was your question, Commissioner?
The 2014 appropriated amount was 2.3 million, and the request for 2015 is over 3 million.
Isn't that
Yes.
some of our Microsoft agreements?
Yes, David. The significant increase there is the Microsoft agreement. We reached the statutory year when we have to renew that agreement. And Microsoft, they move this up every year. It's across the board. It's
So Microsoft increased.
yes, sir. It's Microsoft Enterprise Agreement.
Which again is one of the reasons why we're getting extremely diligent on making sure we don't have duplicate equipment for single individuals.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Human resources.
Good afternoon.
Ms. Flynn.
HR has, I won't describe them as issues, I'll describe them as concerns.
Issues.
Nope, just two concerns. The first one, Debbie and I did discuss, I guess it was last week, HR had requested the addition of a new position, an HR benefits analyst. It's a pay grade 18. We currently have one position in our department with that title. That position primarily is involved in what we call our data integrity management and leave management. So those are the two primary duties that this individual is engaged in. What has happened in over a fairly short period of time is that this individual, because of the time that's required for the weekly data files that are required by PEBC, we do have deadlines. Those are deadline-driven files. That individual is spending probably 3 days out of the week getting those files ready for PEBC, which leaves about 2 days, sometimes less, to deal with the second primary component of this position, and that's leave management. Some of the larger departments, some are represented here today, can attest to the fact that we really have seen an increase, not so much in the volume. I think we've had a little bit of an increase in the volume with FML, for example. But what comes once that those FML situations are identified,
paperwork is submitted, paperwork is approved, timesheets have to be looked at. There's a lot of outreach to departments to make sure that timesheets are recorded properly, that the department and the employee knows exactly how much time the employee has, for example, under FML. If there are premiums that are due during that period of time, if the employee, for example, doesn't have sufficient leave, paid leave to take them throughout the entire process, then of course that employee is responsible for paying those premiums directly to the county. So there's just a lot of work that goes into the leave management component of this position. And to be frank with you, we are not getting all of the cases reviewed. Right now we have about 600 leave cases. Some we can get through fairly quickly. What really kills us are those cases that we call intermittent cases, where employees take off and they're back, and they take off and they're back. That just takes a lot of time to go through those situations, talking to the departments, talking to employees, and then a huge component also in talking with employees, depending upon where they are in their leave of absence. If we see cases where employees are off for extended periods of time, maybe they've exhausted half of their FML, then we really need to reach out to those employees, especially those who may not be coming back, because that's the case sometimes. Maybe they have a disability. And so we will initiate the conversation in a very sensitive way to make sure that the employee is aware of disability benefits, our shared sick leave program, if they've not made application, what premiums they do, the cost of COBRA, how that process works. So, you know, for some cases it's just a lot of work. Not every case is that involved, but many of the cases are. What happens when we don't intervene, when we find out about these situations late in the game, sometimes we'll have situations, and we've had situations, where employees may owe the county for premiums not paid, and then that can be a challenge to locate individuals and convince them to pay premiums that might be due. A few other things that we've run into is that under health care reform, we have to operate within what is called rescission rules, which means that if we get late notice of an employee, for example, whose time may be up, who may be separating from county service, then benefits run through the end of the month. So let's say it's the end of this month, and we don't receive notice until maybe we're right past the month, the end of the month. Under rescission rules, we are not allowed to go back and terminate coverage retroactively. So we are obligated, because we have no choice then, to ensure that there's coverage through the end of the month, which means that the county then is on the hook for those claims when it might not have otherwise been. So this can get really complicated, especially when we are not engaged. Oftentimes we are. We all work very closely. My staff does an excellent job of letting me know when we have situations that might get a little bit tricky or dicey. And departments are great. We counsel departments all the time. We meet with department heads, managers. So it just takes a lot of work. There's a lot of work that our departments do, especially the large departments, and there's a lot of work once the paperwork's in the pipeline. So our request...
So, Ms. Glenn,
yes,
you can
sir.
save us money with this position?
I don't know that I can save us money, Commissioner.
Wrong answer, Ms. Glenn.
I won't make a promise that I can't keep. But what I can tell you is that I think Joyce and I will sleep better at night, knowing that we have our hands on these cases and that we've counseled employees appropriately. Employees know what benefits they're entitled to, and that we're not trying to make fixes after the fact. And oftentimes, we're doing that. To your point about saving money, we have actually done a little bit of research, not much, on what it would cost to, well, not what it would cost, but what would be involved in outsourcing. Because some agencies, because this is so time intensive, specifically FML, have actually outsourced this function. It's a booger bear, pardon my technical term, just to keep your arms wrapped around it. We found that some organizations have moved to outsourcing. Those that have, however, and we've spoken with a local city that moved to outsource and did outsource FML, and they're having some issues. A couple of things that have occurred and that we've read about. Of course, you lose control. So if you outsource FML, you have a vendor who then employees are working with, talking to, and then sometimes that, obviously, then there potentially can be a gap. What I failed to mention is that we're oftentimes looking at several leaves concurrently. FML.
You're about to talk yourself out of this deal.
Yeah.
How am I doing that? I'm just
By
explaining to you.
continuing to talk.
Okay. So, thank you. I appreciate your time.
For what it's worth, audit would support this position because payroll and HR have to be hand in hand to keep things the way they need to be so that we don't let employees not make payments and leave going to county money, or that we make sure that we pay people the correct amount and apply it all regulatory. And it's difficult back on payroll just as it's difficult on HR. And so I don't speak up very often, but I will speak up in a sense inside my payroll hat that say that she really does need this position.
I'm going to intuit that by not having to make fixes after the fact, and by not having to suffer the cost of outsourcing this function, we're going to save money.
Yes, sir.
Therefore,
I agree.
I move approval of adding this position.
Who's handling this function right now?
It's primarily the one position that we do have, the HR benefits analyst. And again, we're simply asking for a second position.
That's the position that's taken
Second.
3 days
I'll
to do
second,
the
so
benefits.
Second.
Doesn't have time to do the other.
Discuss it.
Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. I'm afraid to ask for my second, express my
Go
second.
for it, Ms.
concern.
Lynn. You've got issues.
This one not as urgent, to be perfectly honest. I did want to bring the court's attention, though, to our volunteer program. We currently have that program budgeted at $8,900. We did submit our budget and requested $11,000, which would be about a $2,100 increase. We looked at historically how much we funded, how much we've had funded for this position. Back in, I believe it was 2012, we were like at 12,000. It could have been further back than that. But what we're asking for the additional money for are a couple of things. We really want to take advantage of technology that's available to us. For example, one of the things that we've done this year, and I believe last, is that we actually utilize a website for the auction for our drive, our summer drive, food drive. And I believe that costs $500. It provides us an opportunity to have outreach to employees who we might not otherwise engage in the process.
How much
So,
additional are you asking?
$2,100.
Huh?
$2,100.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion, a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. I'll find my seat.
But that brings up a good question. Should we be paying for that out of the county's budget or from the proceeds that we're raising for other organizations? Just a question.
Is the software something that continues on from that point forward?
No.
Or is it just a one-time deal?
It's a per-use basis, I think. I mean, it's just a question.
How much of that, are we talking about $300 or $400 for that deal, or what are we talking about?
It's $500, and we will use it for United Way. But I think Debbie raises an interesting question. For us, for our purposes, it really has just allowed us to really engage employees who we might not other engage in our initiatives.
Do we have to pay for it with United Way, then for the food bank, then for the everything else?
No,
or is it one time?
it's one $500 payment fee charge per year.
Well, I think we look into the possibility of reducing one of our, but it's, for $500, it's probably really not worth trying to reduce it or figure out where to reduce it. and just go forward with it. Thank you.
Purchasing.
Move approval.
Second.
Any discussion? Vote. Passes unanimously.
Facilities.
Move for approval.
Of all of the items, all the way
The
through,
facilities.
Millions of dollars.
All the way through.
so we've got a motion and a second, so is there anything in here that we really need to be at least aware of as we pass this budget?
There's, if you want to focus on the capital that we've included for facilities this year, it's significant.
So primarily, what are we doing with capital? I mean, I know we're moving into a civil courts building, so we're actually got the furnishings for that. Is that in this budget, or is that out of our capital?
That's out of the bond proceeds.
So it's not in these numbers.
No, sir. Getting to it. No, I'm making myself dizzy. There's several elevator modernizations. One's in Plaza, the other is in the parking garage associated with the Plaza building. There's half of the needed expansion out at the Dion Bagsby Sub-Courthouse and Southwest Fort Worth. That's projected to be $6.6 million. I think we've got 3.3 in here.
3.2.
3.2, thank you. Parking expansion at Moundsville, I'm just going to hit on the big ones. City County Jail, there's the initial architectural fees, looking at that building as a whole as we get into the future renovation of it. And this, I think in particular, is looking at the exterior elevator. Facilities request was to be up front and be a little bit ahead of the game in the design on the exterior elevator. Some potential real estate needed out at Cold Springs. You know, there's been discussions with the
On that
railroad.
railroad. Our good buddies.
Again, elevators at the Curry Justice Center. Now, there is $1 million in here for Resource Connection. We talked about that a little bit in the budget letter. Stepping back and looking at the Resource Connections budget and what their long-term needs, some of their long-term needs are, there's about $5 million worth of long-term needs over the next 5 to 6 years. By funding this $1 million and projecting that they'll have $1 million available through their oil and gas proceeds or excess cash in the Resource Connection Enterprise Fund, should give us $2 million to proceed with some big projects. One that's of critical importance is this main electrical switch gear. That is stuff that we own, and even though we have it tested every year, those people that test it are getting more and more leery about testing it. So see that as the highest priority as something that we need to move forward on. Fire and sprinkler.
So is that in their budget?
The other $1 million is in Resource Connection. This would give us a combination of two, and then we look forward to future years in Resource Connection repaying this.
Well, but again, what is their oil and gas fund got in it?
It looks like the oil and gas revenues have been declining over the last few years. We're projecting, I want to say, $280,000 to $300,000 there. They'll have some cash, not only in the in the oil and gas fund, but they'll have cash in their main enterprise fund. Just like everything else, we overestimate expenditures, we underestimate revenue, so they'll have some resources that'll be available there.
Laura, what's in their cash?
Oh, I've got that right here. I'm sorry, I didn't totally understand your question.
Just in their oil and gas account. Yeah, I mean, but.
Hold on. Oh, I'm sorry. One more file. resource connection. Here's some of my little notes at the bottom here. In 512, which is the oil and gas fund, we're looking at possibly beginning cash balance of $413,000, $280,000 coming in new royalties, and $306,000 as excess cash after funding a 10% reserve in the main enterprise fund. So there's that million.
So that's the million, and then you're saying that what we're talking about may be a $2 million deal?
We have $1 million in our capital funding and $1 million from here.
We had talked in terms of a plan to
And we are-
replenish the oil and gas, and it looks like we are now taking it to a balance of $6,015.
I mean, it
in the
could,
fund.
until we get through the major improvements that are needed out there. And again, looking at 5 to 6 year plan on what's needed in 15 to 20 year projects. That's our focus of what would come from oil and gas funds.
That's something.
There's two things that we should be looking at as money coming into that. Oil and gas is one of them, but the other one is taking these investments and calculating a depreciation expense, which would then be passed along to our tenants. And I realize that we are the major tenants out there. But again, if we're looking at it from that perspective, do we have depreciation calculated anywhere in any of our numbers?
And there is an element of that. They had already, through the board, arranged for a 40 cent, and I may have my years backwards, 40 cents next year, rental equate 60/40 over 2 years.
Could we get something, a little plan or something like that that shows what we're doing on our capital and bring that to the court? I mean, we've already approved the resource connection, and we'll approve this, but I would like to see something that addresses on an annual basis the depreciation, which would be spread to our tenants, and then the oil and gas revenue which comes in, which will just simply add to our ability to be able to purchase equipment out there. We should still be passing those costs along, and the cost of those along to the
There are
the
meetings
tenants.
planned in the next few weeks to discuss those issues.
Well, I hope they're before we get to the passing of the budget. So the next few weeks may not get it.
We'll make sure that that happens. And Commissioner Brooks, let me correct something that your train of thought. The $1 million that we were saying is going to cost to do this, to do the switchgear, we're not saying that it should be funded out of oil and gas this year. That should come from non-debt capital from the county. Then we're going to start a repayment process again to pay back the county.
What Debbie said was $1 million from the county and $1 million from the oil and gas fund.
I did.
And since there will only be $1,006,015 in it, that takes it down to $6,015.
I thought there was $2 million in that when we talked about it the last time.
$2 million in which one? In the
Oil and gas.
No, sir. It should be after the project for the state, there should be 400 some.
Would you please just do a worksheet and
Yes,
let's
we-
bring the
yes,
whole
we will.
discussion back?
Yes, we will. Yes, we will.
So we have a motion, well, anything else under our capital from that standpoint? We stopped at the resource connection, but I think that was near the end.
I would like to move approval of the capital save and accept the resource connection, which I would ask to be put on the to be continued list.
We already have a motion and a second for the facilities budget, but I think we could just leave we can add to that, if that's all right, we can add to that the consideration of that item.
So you want a whole resource connection budget?
You know, I don't mind going ahead and passing it. We can always come back. Let's not even hold on to that. We'll just come back if we need to and address it at that point in time. So, because they're going to go with that schedule. So
So my motion was to approve facilities budget from page
Whatever to whatever.
185 all the way through page 235.
And there was a second. So any further discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
We're going to go into Road and Bridge Fund now. First one is Precinct 1.
I'll move approval of the Precinct 1 budget with the pointing out the fact that we've still got 2 reclassification requests pending.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. I don't see the reclasses in, are they? Maybe they're down in some place. Are they in one of the other areas, Roy?
They're in the garage, the maintenance.
And,
You're showing one, they're actually two.
okay, I'm sorry.
We have a motion. Did we have a second? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Precinct 2.
I move for the approval of Precinct 2 budget.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Precinct 3.
Move approval, precinct 3.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Precinct 4.
Move approval of precinct 4.
With adjustments,
What?
with the adjustments we've included here.
Right.
Second.
We have a
It's
motion.
already been put in, hasn't it?
It's on the spreadsheet, it's not in your book, sir.
Okay.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Transportation Department.
No issues?
I have a note that says no issue.
No issues.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Includes central garage, sun shop also?
Yes, that included all of that.
Okay. That's it.
2 items we haven't discussed here today that I can recall is, one, we have talked about and got a proposal from the Sheriff's Association group for certification pay for their officers that I would like to see the court to consider something on that, and the other is the court coordinators.
And the court coordinators, we're going to get something back, and you're going to pass around that policy to each one of the court members? For their, and then on the,
Certification, do y'all have a copy of that? What they had proposed? Y'all came up with some calculations and you broke it down.
okay, we'll go back and look at that. I guess the other question that I would ask on the certification, I know we've got something on that, but I would like for us, I know that Denton County does a certification for all levels of employees, not just the law enforcement. And so if we're going to look at certification pay, I would like for us to not just limit that toward the law enforcement from that standpoint. I'd like to at least get some sort of a feel for what that would mean if we took it countywide and included other areas. And I guess what I would say is,
What, Lynn?
well, for example, in IT, some of their jobs may not require certification for certain things that they do. I know in Denton, what they say is if a position requires no additional education, if someone has an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree, they get it. If it requires a bachelor's degree, then they wouldn't get it unless they had a master's or a PhD. It could be certification, it could be CPA for in the audit area. Of course, if you only got it for one thing, then you might, at that point in time, you would probably get it just simply for the fact that it's required, a degree is required. So it's some of those types of things which I think we'd want to do. And then one of the key things that I would say, if we consider that, that we need to add to that is that the employee, not us, but the employee is the one responsible for submitting on an annual basis proof that, one, they qualified, and once they've proven that they qualify, on an annual basis, they've got to submit something that says they've remained qualified. And that way we don't get into these instances where we find that somebody dropped their certification and we continued to pay it and they didn't, and they forgot, quite unintentionally, but they just forgot to tell us, and then we get 3, 4, 5 years down the line, and then we've got a situation of where we've got to talk with an employee about that.
You may have to budget for another benefit analyst.
And I mean, I think we just look at that and see, I mean, I don't know, maybe we're not talking about that many other people who might qualify for additional certifications, but if we're going to look at it for the law enforcement, I would like to additionally look at it. And is the certification on the law enforcement going to be only if it's above and beyond what is required for their position?
Are we only paying for one certification, or what if somebody has multiple?
Well, I think that's.
That anybody that the proposal was that if they had any or all three of their certifications, it would be the same amount.
Right, if it was intermediate or above, they would qualify for the $100 per month, and that's even if they have one jailer side or peace officer side, it would only be the one single $100 per month.
Their request was $100 a month per person.
Correct.
Per certification. But we looked at $100 and $75 and $50, I believe.
Correct.
And I believe everybody got a copy of that.
I have the costs if you want me.
It's expensive, I understand that, but it's something that we told them we would consider, so I lay it out to you.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, I don't have any problem at all. I just.
And I don't want to open Pandora's box to the entire county. I mean, we're talking, we have only been talking Sheriff's Department or law enforcement up to this point, which would include
constables, Emmy's office,
the investigators in the DA's office, and I guess investigators in the medical examiner's office, I believe. Those.
Right.
Fire marshal also.
And I mean, I understand that the law enforcement brought that forward, but I think if we're going to consider it, I would at least like to know what the ramifications would be as if we broaden that to the other areas.
That's something that took quite a bit of research and study to come up to this point, and I don't know if we got enough time between now and budget time to do the entire county and see what all would qualify.
I think you could find really with any field, from HR to the auditor's office to budget to IT, you would find a certification, you would find a degree, you would find something.
Could you put out an email to the other department heads and elected officials just to say that as we're looking at this, you know, if we were to apply this to your department, who or how many do you think might qualify, and just see what that estimate would be?
Sure. We can do that.
We're opening Pandora's box.
I don't disagree, but I think when we start talking about doing it for half the folks in the county, the other half may, I mean, again, this is what Denton County, and I'm not sure they would suggest that you consider doing it, but that's what, you do have certain counties that basically give it across the county.
Well, for whatever it's worth, from my perspective, a degree of equity is important in this consideration. I see where Commissioner Johnson is coming from, but I also see some concern from the county judge's standpoint. So we may have to invest some time, and if we have to do it, we can phase it out to make sure that we address the issue in a comprehensive way so that we don't create any further inequity in our compensational package. You know, P25 versus P50, we already existing some of that inequity in there already. So sometimes we fix one problem.
I'm only bringing that up because I agree to serve on the committee, to work with them, to come up with their proposals. That was their proposal. I'm bringing it to the court.
We did. I acknowledge the fact that we promised the law enforcement community that we would look into it. So we will look into it. It doesn't mean that we'll.
Well, I'll throw something out there. Why don't we, I would move that we appropriate $50 to law enforcement for certification. And it's just not $50 per certification, but $50 if they have.
What was that dollar amount for $50 in?
Annually with fringe, it's 445,000 ballpark.
445?
Mhm.
So we're not talking about little figures. Is that your proposal? I'll second.
Put that on the table.
Any discussion? And, okay. Please vote. Motion, oh, wait a minute, how we got 4 votes up there? Okay. Motion passes 3-2. I'll make the motion that we make that same proposal for the remaining departments within the county.
Not knowing how many it's going to be or how much money.
Well, I would have loved to have waited until we got that information, but we went ahead and moved forward at this point in
We
time.
know how much this is going to be. We don't know how much yours is going to be.
Well, so you would rather wait until we can get that number and then go from there?
I would rather wait, yes.
Well, then I'll go ahead and hold off, but I do want that before we complete our budget at this point in time.
So we're going to do the certification for the law enforcement? Was that what the
And they're going to have to submit their information themselves, and they'll have to turn that in to HR in order for them to be qualified. If they don't turn it in, they don't get it. And then on an annual basis, they're going to have to send something that says they continue to certify and they continue to do that.
Your Honor, that's all we have at this time.
Okay, then, at this point in time,
Let me just say that
recess.
No, because I was going to say, we have this agenda item on our regular agendas for tomorrow also. So we will carry that until we pass the budget on a weekly basis. So we adjourn at this point.
Okay. We are adjourned.